بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السيدات والسادة، حضورنا الكريم، نيابة عن دولة قطر والأمم المتحدة يشرفني أنا منى العثمان أن أرحب بكم أجمل ترحيب في الاجتماع الأول لقادة التحالف العالمي لمكافحة الجوع والفقر. منذ عام واحد ولد هذا التحالف ب148 عضواً، مؤسساً في مدينة ريو دي جانيرو، واليوم هو علامة تاريخية فارقة. نجتمع وإياكم هنا في الدوحة على هامش القمة العالمية الثانية للتنمية الاجتماعية، جامعة أكثر من 200 عضو التزموا بإيفاء الوعود إلى أفعال. هنا لحظة التقييم لعام رائع مضى، وهنا شراكات ملموسة ستغير حياة الناس وترسم مسار طموح يضع الإنسان في صميم التنمية. هنا سنثبت أن الجوع والفقر ليس حتميين، وإنما خيارات يمكننا تغييرها. أما الآن فاسمحوا لي أن أقدم المتحدث الأول الذي سيلقي كلمة الترحيب نيابة عن دولتنا قطر المضيفة لهذا الحدث الهام. أدعو إلى المنصة سعادة السيدة مريم بنت علي بن ناصر المسند، وزير الدولة للتعاون الدولي بوزارة الخارجية في دولة قطر، فلتتفضل لتلقي كلمتها مشكورة.
Good morning, everyone. Allow me to welcome you all to your second home here, the state of Qatar. And I will be delivering my speech in Arabic, so please put your headset on. السيد الرئيس، سعادة أنالينا بيربوك رئيسة الدورة 80 للجمعية العامة للأمم المتحدة، سعادة ويلينغتون دياس وزيرة التنمية الاجتماعية والمساعدة والأسرة ومكافحة الجوع في جمهورية البرازيل والرئيس المشارك للتحالف العالمي، سعادة إيفا غرانداس وزيرة الدولة للتعاون الدولي في مملكة إسبانيا والرئيسة المشاركة للتحالف العالمي، أصحاب السعادة السيدات والسادة. يسعدني أن أرحب بكم جميعاً في دولة قطر في هذا الاجتماع الأول لقادة التحالف العالمي ضد الجوع والفقر على هامش القمة العالمية الثانية للتنمية الاجتماعية. ونثمن في هذا المقام مبادرة جمهورية البرازيل الصديقة بإطلاق التحالف أثناء رئاستها لمجموعة العشرين وجهود الرؤساء المشاركين في تحويل هذه المبادرة إلى واقع يخدم الإنسانية جمعاء. إن استضافة قطر لهذا الاجتماع تأتي انطلاقاً من نهجها الراسخ في سرعة الاستجابة والتنمية من أجل السلام، ومن قناعتها بأن القضاء على الجوع والفقر مسؤولية جماعية تتطلب تضامناً دولياً وشراكة حقيقية قائمة على العدالة والمساواة. أصحاب السعادة، ما زال أكثر من 700 مليون إنسان حول العالم يعيشون في فقر مدقع، فيما تتفاقم آثار النزاعات وتغير المناخ والديون وشح التمويل، مما يهدد مسيرة التنمية في العديد من الدول النامية. وفي هذا السياق رحبت دولة قطر باعتماد وثيقة التزام إشبيلية خلال مؤتمر تمويل التنمية الرابع، التي أكدت أهمية إصلاح منظومة التمويل الدولية وخلق بيئة اقتصادية عالمية أكثر إنصافاً ومرونة بما يضمن الحق في التنمية وعدم ترك أحد خلف الركب. تعمل دولة قطر بقيادة حضرة صاحب السمو الشيخ تميم بن حمد آل ثاني أمير البلاد المفدى حفظه الله على تنفيذ رؤيتها الوطنية قطر 2030 لبناء اقتصاد متنوع ومستدام قائم على المعرفة والابتكار وتعزيز الاستثمار في الإنسان والحماية الاجتماعية والرعاية الصحية وحماية البيئة. وفي هذا الإطار تتابع دولة قطر بالشراكة مع الأمم المتحدة تنفيذ برنامج عمل الدوحة 2022-2031، وهو برنامج التزامات متجددة ومعززة من جانب أقل البلدان نمواً وشركائها في التنمية، وأطلق في الدوحة عام 2022 بهدف تمكين هذه الدول ومساعدتها على الخروج من فئة أقل البلدان نمواً نحو التنمية المستدامة. ووقعت دولة قطر ممثلة في صندوق قطر للتنمية اتفاقاً مع مكتب الأمم المتحدة للممثلة السامية لأقل البلدان نمواً لتمويل مشروعين رئيسيين، هما تعزيز القدرة على الصمود وإنشاء نظام للتخزين الغذائي لمعالجة انعدام الأمن الغذائي. السيدات والسادة، تؤمن دولة قطر بدور الأمم المتحدة كمنصة رئيسية لتوحيد الجهود وتعزيز العمل متعدد الأطراف وتواصل دعمها لنظام المنسقين المقيمين ولبرامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائية لضمان تنفيذ أجندة التنمية المستدامة 2030 بفاعلية وشمولية. وختاماً، تجدد دولة قطر التزامها بالعمل مع جميع الشركاء من أجل عالم خال من الجوع والفقر، وترسيخ التنمية من أجل السلام كنهج شامل يجمع بين الاستجابة السريعة وبناء القدرات والتمكين الإنساني. فبالشراكة وبالاستثمار في الإنسان وبالإيمان العميق بقيمة التضامن يمكننا أن نضمن أن لا يترك أحد خلف الركب، وأن يكون السلام والتنمية حقاً مشتركاً لكل الشعوب. شكراً لكم سيد الرئيس.
شكراً لكم سعادة الوزيرة. نستمع الآن إلى كلمة سعادة السيد أو السيدة أنالينا بيربوك رئيس الجمعية العامة للأمم المتحدة، فلتتفضل مشكورة.
A child who hasn't eaten for days, too weak to cry. A father counting the last coins in his pocket. A mother shifting through rubble to find food. Searching not only for something to feed her family, but for hope that one day war will end. This is not just one family story. It is a story of an entire generation on the brink of being lost to war and starvation. Today, rates of hunger and food insecurity remain alarmingly high. In 2024, roughly 673 million people faced hunger, and about 2.3 billion endured moderate or severe food insecurity. That is billions wondering where the next meal will come from. Millions having to see their children going hungry to bed. All this while the world wastes, on the other hand, on average over 1 billion meals every single day. In many cases, food is even discarded directly from the supermarket shelves. The crisis of hunger is not a lack of food. It is entirely preventable. Your Excellencies, dear ministers, ladies and gentlemen, hunger and poverty are not just consequences of war. These scourges persist in the South and North, developing and developed countries alike. Allow me to make 3 specific points at the beginning regarding our shared responsibility and shared interest in fighting hunger and poverty. First, we are seeing new epicenters of hunger and poverty emerging as a result of climate crisis. When I visited the Sahel region, I stood in 53 degrees Celsius, heat among sand and rocks. I could hardly breathe, where 50 years ago, cotton once grew. Local farmers told me how the rains no longer come when they used to. The wells have run dry, the harvests have withered. Mothers now ration the little millet they have left. This is not just one farm or one country. It is a new frontline of insecurity. Rising temperatures are fueling food crises globally. But we are not here today to simply admire the problem. We are here to share solutions because the future still lies in our hands. If we continue like this, it is estimated that if the planet warms by 2 degrees, 189 million more people could face food insecurity. But if some continue to doubt or even boycott the fight against climate crisis altogether, and the planet rather warms by 4 degrees, instead of 189 million facing food insecurity, the number could reach to 1.8 billion, 1 in every 8 people alive today. But there is also a positive side, which still lies in our hands to change course. If we combine our efforts to fight the climate crisis and live up to the promises we made in the Paris Agreement to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, the numbers of people subjected to poverty could be reduced by several hundred million by 2025. Fighting the climate crisis and standing up for social justice to end hunger is deeply interconnected. Both is purely in our hands. This is still not our goal of no poverty, but it's a situation we can handle if we also join forces on adaptation as well as loss and damage, areas in which we are also not simply powerless bystanders. For example, the women in Sahel who I met are able to grow crops and feed their families thanks to the support of the international community through solar-powered drip irrigation system that cut water use by up to 50%, and, if connecting it to weather forecast, to grow food even in the hottest surroundings. Initiatives like this, combining fighting climate crisis, our new answers of technology, and fighting hunger and poverty, should be in the interest of everyone. Because hunger and poverty are not contained by borders. Their consequences cascade across regions, across continents. Therefore, second, hunger and poverty, as they are drivers of displacement, are also part of our bigger global responsibility. When you see your child too weak to even cry out for food, when fields turn to dust, or when bakeries on the front lines of conflicts are deliberately targeted, people are left with no other option but to move. It is estimated that every 1% increase in food insecurity drives nearly 2% more people to migrate. Again, this is not a choice. Families do not want to leave their homes, their communities. It is a last resort. And a large-scale displacement puts pressure on neighboring states, straining resources and testing governments. Therefore, ending hunger and poverty is not merely an act of charity, it is a matter of security, even of self-interest for all countries. But this story doesn't end there. Hunger does not just follow insecurity and conflicts, it fuels them. When I met local people in Mali, they told me how young farmers with fields barren and pockets empty often join extremist groups. Not out of ideology, but again out of survival. Thus begins a vicious circle. Climate insecurity leads to hunger and poverty. Hunger and poverty spew migration and conflict. And conflict deepens hunger and poverty once more. This cycle threatens our entire Sustainable Development Agenda, not just SDG 2 on zero hunger. Because when we fail on hunger and poverty, we undermine the foundation of all progress, from education and equality to peace and climate action. And that leads to my third and final point, which is on the need to integrate hunger throughout global processes. I commend Brazil's leadership in launching the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, and for reminding the world that without defeating hunger and poverty, no society can grow or thrive. This week's second World Summit for Social Development is our chance to renew global resolve to tackle this issue. The Doha Declaration calls for holistic strategies to confront multidimensional poverty, hunger, and malnutrition by strengthening resilience, financing, and social protection. And it also links our efforts in the Paris Climate Agreement, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Sevilla commitment to close financial gaps for social development, and most recently, the Pact for the Future, which calls for a systematic transformation of food systems to eliminate food insecurity and all forms of malnutrition. These are not siloed agendas. They all underscore that human security is a foundation for global security. Besides our medium and long-term strategies, which need, because we can't change the root of causes of crisis overnight, we should still not forget to focus also and intensively on immediately action when, as we sit here today, starvation is growing in certain regions, especially in war zones. Without the World Food Programme last year alone, 125 million people would have lacked life-saving food assistance. So we have to remember, every cut we are making, your governments, member states, are currently making in international organizations, always affect real people's life. It affects the child who hasn't eaten for days, too weak to cry. The father counting the last coins in his pockets. The mother shifting through the rubble to find food. And remember that we, the UN, governments and partners, have made real progress if we do not cut, but rather join forces. Extreme poverty has declined from a high of 2 billion people in 1990, a third of global population at the time, to about 800 million today. In a world of plenty, where there should be more than enough to go around, ensuring that everyone, everywhere has enough to eat is entirely possible. That is why today's meeting is so important, to move from pledges to practical actions, from statements to solutions. Because a world free of hunger and poverty is not a distant aspiration, it is within reach, if we work for it together. I thank you.
شكرا لكم سعادة الرئيسة. أما الآن فدعونا ننتقل إلى الجزء الهام من برنامجنا، وهو عرض أعمال التحالف العالمي في عام 2025 وخطط عام 26 و27، حيث سيقدم لنا لمحة شاملة عن التقدم الملموس الذي حققه هذا التحالف في عامه الأول، بالإضافة إلى خارطة الطريق الطموحة التي تنتظرنا. فدعوني أدعو إلى المنصة سعادة السيد ويلينغتون دياس، وزير التنمية الاجتماعية والمساعدة والأسرة ومكافحة الجوع في جمهورية البرازيل الاتحادية، والرئيس المشارك للتحالف العالمي، فليتفضل لإلقاء كلمته.
Muito bom dia. Bom dia. Eu começo citando um cientista brasileiro, Josué de Castro. Ele alertou, faz alguns anos, que quando uma grande parte da população não come, a outra parte da população não dorme, com medo da parte da população que não come. É em nome de mudar esta realidade em muitos países do mundo que estamos aqui. Assim, eu quero saudar Sua Excelência, a Ministra de Estado para a Cooperação Internacional, Marianne Izin-Nassé, a quem agradeço pela generosidade e, sobretudo, pela visão estratégica do Catar em hospedar esta nossa primeira reunião de líderes da Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza desde a sua criação. Sua Excelência Ana Helena Baerbock, presidente da Assembleia Geral das Nações Unidas, a quem agradeço o acolhimento desta reunião de líderes no seio da segunda Cúpula Mundial para o Desenvolvimento Social. Sua Excelência Eva Granados, secretária para o Desenvolvimento Internacional da Espanha, minha parceira na copresidência da Aliança Global, em nome de quem quero saudar todos os membros da Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza. Senhor Renato Godinho, diretor do Mecanismo de Apoio da Aliança Global e secretário desta reunião, juntamente com nosso querido embaixador Aldo, saudar aqui toda a delegação brasileira, excelências, chefes de governo, ministros, chefes de agências, embaixadores, embaixadoras, campeões e representantes da Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza, delegados à segunda Cúpula Mundial para o Desenvolvimento Social, senhoras e senhores da imprensa. É uma honra recebê-los nesta histórica primeira reunião de líderes da Aliança contra a Fome e a Pobreza. Agradeço ao Catar e às Nações Unidas por acolherem este encontro às vésperas da segunda Cúpula Mundial para o Desenvolvimento Social. Não por acaso. O desenvolvimento social e a erradicação da fome e da pobreza são inseparáveis. E estamos aqui para provar que são alcançáveis. Há exatamente um ano, no Rio de Janeiro, nasceu a Aliança Global. Éramos 148 membros fundadores, unidos por uma convicção: a fome e a pobreza não são inevitáveis. São, como disse o presidente Lula, resultado de escolhas políticas. E se são escolhas, podemos fazer escolhas diferentes. Nestes 12 meses, partimos dos potentes compromissos assumidos com a Aliança em novembro passado, por 41 governos, 13 organizações internacionais públicas e instituições financeiras e 19 entidades filantrópicas e sem fins lucrativos, para alcançar 500 milhões de pessoas com transferências de renda até 2030, ampliar merenda escolar de alta qualidade para mais 150 milhões de crianças, atender 200 milhões de mulheres e crianças de 0 a 6 anos com saúde materna e primeira infância e alcançar 100 milhões de pessoas com inclusão socioeconômica, com foco nas mulheres. Estamos avançando para apoiar esses países e organizações a cumprir essas metas. Hoje, somos 201 membros, 104 países e 97 organizações internacionais, instituições financeiras, agências da ONU e organizações da sociedade civil. Em 12 meses, transformamos uma promessa em um mecanismo vivo de solidariedade, coordenação e ação. Outros membros se apresentam. Deixe-me compartilhar brevemente a jornada deste primeiro ano da Aliança Global. Em dezembro de 2024, o Brasil estabeleceu uma equipe de apoio à transição para garantir ação imediata. Construímos a cesta de políticas da Aliança, um alicerce do nosso trabalho, baseado em evidências concretas. 51 categorias de programas e 70 exemplos de implementação nacional submetidos pelos membros e cuidadosamente curados. Em fevereiro de 2025, criamos o Conselho de Campeões, reunindo representantes de alto nível de até 50 membros, países, organizações financeiras da ONU, filantropias e sociedade civil, para impulsionar o engajamento político e operacional. Estamos em conversas para estabelecer um assento representando instituições acadêmicas, universidades do mundo. No mesmo mês, o Conselho e a equipe de transição lançaram a iniciativa de planejamento acelerado, Fast Track, um processo estruturado para transformar planos nacionais em parcerias concretas. Em março, 13 países prioritários começaram a desenvolver programas nacionais de grande escala baseados na cesta de políticas, independente do que outros países trabalhavam. Entre março e julho, 9 países validaram seus planos e os apresentaram aos membros da aliança. Até o momento, recebemos 85 manifestações de interesse de membros dispostos a apoiar os programas nacionais com conhecimento ou financiamento. Em julho, em Sevilha, na Espanha, lançamos iniciativas para buscar um financiamento mais bem integrado contra a fome e a pobreza, como detalhará minha colega presidenta Eva Granados. Em outubro, em Roma, inauguramos o mecanismo de apoio da Aliança, sediado na FAO, liderado pelo diretor Renato Domiti Godinho, com equipes no Brasil, na Etiópia, na Itália, nos Estados Unidos e na Tailândia, e esperamos, muito em breve, também aqui na região árabe. Gestamos ainda no Conselho de Campeões da Aliança uma declaração sobre fome, pobreza e ação climática, centrada no ser humano, que será adotada pelos chefes de Estado nesta sexta-feira, na COP30, em Belém, no meu país, no coração da Amazônia. A declaração deixará claro que os piores impactos das mudanças climáticas recaem sobre os mais pobres e vulneráveis, e que uma transição climática justa deve proteger seus direitos, fortalecer sua resiliência e garantir dignidade humana. Convido todos os países aqui representados a endossarem esta declaração ainda esta semana, de modo a participarem da adoção. E no dia de hoje, aqui nesta reunião de líderes, países como Etiópia, Haiti, Quênia e Zâmbia anunciarão parcerias para programas nacionais de grande escala em alimentação escolar, agricultura familiar, proteção social, acesso à água e resiliência climática, com apoio coordenado de bancos multilaterais, países do Sul, doadores bilaterais, agências da ONU e entidades, todos alinhados a prioridades nacionais. Esses não são projetos fragmentados, são programas nacionais liderados por governos desenhados para alcançar milhões de pessoas com transferência de renda, alimentação escolar, apoio a pequenos agricultores, água potável e oportunidades econômicas. Outros países, Benin, Palestina, Ruanda, Tanzânia, já têm pré-planos validados. Uma nova onda se prepara. Camboja, Cuba, Líbano, República Dominicana, Indonésia, Moçambique e Somália já estão avançados nesse processo ou expressaram interesse em começar. Mas o nosso impacto coletivo vai muito além desses países. A Aliança ajudou a colocar a luta contra a fome e a pobreza de volta à agenda global. Países membros ao redor do mundo estão fortalecendo seus próprios programas, gerando inclusão econômica e empregos. Neste ano, o crescimento da pobreza e da fome foi estancado, e esses flagelados começam a recuar. Em seu relatório de 2024, quando a aliança foi lançada, a FAO calculava 735 milhões de pessoas na fome até 2023. Neste ano, o relatório de 2025 aponta 673 milhões de pessoas na fome. Embora a trajetória ainda esteja muito aquém do necessário para cumprir as promessas do desenvolvimento sustentável para 2030, em vários países o progresso tem sido promissor. O Brasil é prova viva disso. Entre 2023 e 2024, retiramos 24,4 milhões de pessoas da fome e 7,6 milhões da pobreza, graças a políticas baseadas em evidências e a disposição do presidente Lula de incluir os pobres no orçamento. Em 2024, saímos oficialmente do mapa da fome da ONU pela segunda vez, antes da meta que havíamos estabelecido para 2026. A Aliança Global é um instrumento para dotar mais países da capacidade de agir decisivamente contra a fome e a pobreza. Precisamos de atenção especial para as regiões mais vulneráveis. Mais de 3/4 da população em extrema pobreza vivem na África subsaariana ou em países marcados por fragilidades e conflitos. O que torna a aliança diferente? Não impomos estratégias abstratas que não serão implementadas. Juntos, colocamos os países no centro, apoiamos seus planos baseados em evidências, coordenamos parcerias, conhecimento, mobilizamos financiamento integrado e facilitamos cooperação sul-sul e triangular. Quero fazer um anúncio aqui. A partir de hoje, qualquer país membro poderá solicitar ajudas dos demais membros, com apoio do nosso mecanismo da aliança instalado em Roma, em um processo de construção de parcerias totalmente baseado na demanda. A aliança está aberta, pronta e em operação. E faço um chamado. A Aliança Global não é o Brasil, não é a Espanha, não é o Catar, não é o mecanismo de apoio. A aliança somos todos nós, e sem a ação de todos, ela não alcançará nossos objetivos. Hoje convido todos os líderes a anunciarem parcerias e compromissos firmes na luta contra a fome e a pobreza, e a renovarem nossa esperança, nossa energia e, sobretudo, nossa ação. Se escolhermos a justiça, a solidariedade e a ação, se escolhermos colocar os mais pobres no centro de nossos orçamentos, de nossas políticas, de nossa arquitetura financeira global, então a fome e a pobreza podem terminar em breve. Desejo um excelente dia de trabalho a todos. Contem com o Brasil. Muito obrigado.
شكرا لكم سعادة الوزير. أما الآن أدعو إلى المنصة سعادة السيدة إيفا غراناداس وزير الدولة للتعاون الدولي في مملكة إسبانيا والرئيس المشارك للتحالف العالمي، فلتتفضل لإلقاء كلمتها.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días, estimada ministra de Cooperación Internacional de Qatar, presidenta de la Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas, querido Wellington Díaz, ministro de Desarrollo Social de Brasil, Renato Godiño, director del Mecanismo de Apoyo de la Alianza. Es un verdadero honor participar como copresidenta en esta histórica primera reunión de líderes de la Alianza contra el Hambre y la Pobreza. Permítanme comenzar expresando nuestro más profundo agradecimiento al Estado de Qatar por su cálida acogida y su compromiso con esta agenda. Quisiera también reconocer el liderazgo de Brasil y en particular del ministro Wellington Díaz, a quien agradezco su intervención y su incansable dedicación por reavivar la llama de la justicia social en el escenario internacional. Era una cuestión urgente, era un imperativo moral situar nuevamente la lucha contra el hambre y la pobreza en el centro de las prioridades internacionales, desde un enfoque humano y basado en la dignidad y en los derechos de las personas. Y aquí estamos. Nos acercamos al año 2030. No es una fecha lejana, es el umbral de una decisión colectiva y es un punto clave para nuestra historia. El sistema multilateral se tambalea, pero reuniones como la de hoy demuestran que existen espacios donde la esperanza se convierte en acción colectiva. La Alianza es uno de ellos, pero es más que una iniciativa, es un llamado urgente a la conciencia global para hacer frente a la crisis silenciosa en la inseguridad alimentaria. Los datos son contundentes. La presidenta de la Asamblea General los ha dado, así que no los voy a repetir. Pero la pobreza extrema, tras el shock de la pandemia y también de los conflictos, sigue atrapando a 1 de cada 10 personas en el mundo. Y sin un esfuerzo significativo por impulsar el ODS 1, no alcanzaremos en 2030 lo que necesitamos. No podemos mirar hacia otro lado. El hambre no es solo una carencia, es una injusticia que socava el logro de la mayoría de los ODS. Es un fallo colectivo inaceptable y es un problema político en un mundo donde se producen lo suficientes para alimentarnos a todos y a todas. Pero también hay signos de esperanza. En la cuarta Conferencia Internacional sobre Financiación del Desarrollo, en Sevilla, vimos una fuerte voluntad para buscar consensos y el bien común. El compromiso de Sevilla y la plataforma de acción son testimonios del que el multilateralismo respondió y de que la Agenda 2030 sigue siendo el camino para seguir para la mayoría de los países. Con este espíritu nos encontramos hoy aquí, esta mañana, en la reunión de líderes y con este espíritu estaremos también mañana en la segunda cumbre de Desarrollo Social y en breve en la COP30 de Belén. España cree firmemente que es el momento de pasar de las palabras a la acción, con una hoja de ruta clara, eficaz y ambiciosa que movilice apoyo técnico y financiero. Permítanme que, complementando las palabras de mi colega y querido Wellington Díaz, exponga 3 pilares cruciales de cara al presente y al futuro de esta alianza. En primer lugar, la cesta de políticas. En un solo año hemos lanzado iniciativas de implementación rápida en 13 países, 9 ya están en fase avanzada. España participa activamente apoyando a los pequeños agricultores en Etiopía o en República Dominicana. Invitamos a todos los presentes aquí a sumarse. Sabemos qué políticas funcionan e impulsan cambios transformadores. No esperemos más. En segundo lugar, la financiación. Permítanme volver de nuevo a Sevilla, donde hemos aprobado 2 iniciativas de la Alianza contra el Hambre y la Pobreza dirigidas a la financiación integrada en el ODS 1 y el ODS 2 y un segundo SPA dedicado a la protección social resiliente al clima para pequeños agricultores. Ya vemos sus primeros resultados con la propuesta de declaración de líderes de la COP30. Así que movilicemos los compromisos y los recursos para fortalecer los planes de trabajo, porque el momento justo es ahora. Y en tercer lugar, el conocimiento. Hemos reunido a los mejores y a las mejores, líderes en los diagnósticos, en el análisis de políticas, en las guías de implementación. Tenemos estudios académicos y think tanks de gran prestigio que forman parte de esta alianza. Pero queremos más socios, queremos más ideas y todavía más rigor. No solo queremos movilizar recursos, sino que queremos hacerlo con eficacia, con impacto y con respecto al liderazgo de cada uno de los países. Excelencias, no quiero acabar sin antes mencionar a las mujeres, las más perjudicadas por la inseguridad alimentaria. España y su Gobierno y su cooperación estamos comprometidos con la lucha contra el hambre y la pobreza, conscientes de que no se puede lograr sin las mujeres. Por eso el Gobierno español impulsa una estrategia de cooperación feminista, porque tenemos claro que si no llegamos las mujeres, no llega la humanidad. Y sabemos que este desafío puede cumplirse si todos y todas asumimos este compromiso. Hoy España se presenta ante ustedes no solo como nación, sino como una voz firme que no se resigna frente a la lucha contra el hambre y la pobreza. Y lo hacemos como parte de esta alianza que así ha dado sus primeros pasos. Y si algo nos ha enseñado el camino, es que cuando el mundo se une, el cambio llega. La alianza no está sola, existen otros espacios que empujan en la misma dirección y con el mismo espíritu, como los frentes parlamentarios contra el hambre y la pobreza, el Frente Parlamentario Iberoamericano y Caribeño por la Seguridad Alimentaria. Un espacio que ha generado más de 100 leyes aprobadas contra el hambre y que también hace un llamado urgente a la acción para transformar el futuro. Nos reunimos no hace mucho en el Senado de México. No podemos permitirnos la lentitud. 2030 no es un horizonte lejano, es una realidad inminente y el mundo nos está observando. Así que actuemos con responsabilidad, ambición y determinación, porque cuando hay voluntad política, el mundo avanza. Muchísimas gracias.
شكرا لكم السعادة الوزيرة، حضورنا الكريم. وقبل أن ننتقل وإياكم إلى الجزء التالي من هذا البرنامج، في هذا الوقت أطلب من أعضاء وسائل الإعلام التفضل بمغادرة القاعة. شكرا لكم. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الوفود الكرام، ننتقل الآن إلى المناقشة رفيعة المستوى حول موضوع فتح الحيز المالي وحشد التمويل وإعادة ابتكار التعاون الدولي لوضع البرامج القطرية في مركز مكافحة الجوع والفقر. ستجمع هذه الجلسة مجموعة استثنائية من القادة يمثلون البلدان والمنظمات الدولية والمؤسسات المالية والمجتمع المدني، متحدون في التزامهم بتحويل كيفية تمويل وتنفيذ البرامج لمكافحة الجوع والفقر. يشرفني الآن أن أقدم سعادة السيد صلاح أحمد جامع نائب رئيس الوزراء في جمهورية الصومال الفيدرالية، فليتفضل سعادته لإلقاء كلمته.
Your Excellencies, distinguished heads of states and government, honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to address this first Leaders Summit of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. I wish to express my deepest gratitude to the State of Qatar for its gracious hospitality and to the President of Brazil for his visionary leadership in bringing this alliance to life. We gather here in Doha at a time when humanity faces one of its oldest and most stubborn challenges: the injustice of hunger and the persistence of poverty. Around the world, millions of men, women, and children wake up each day uncertain whether they will eat. Behind every statistic, there is a story: a child whose growth is stunted, a mother who skips meals to feed her family, and a farmer whose crops have withered from droughts or floods. These are not distant stories for us in Somalia. They are our daily reality and our daily resolve. For decades, Somalia has endured the compounded shocks of conflict, climate change impact, and poverty. We have lived through droughts that turned fertile land into dust and floods that swept away homes and herds. Yet we have also witnessed the extraordinary courage of our people, farmers replanting after every failed harvest, and pastoralists rebuilding and restocking herds, communities standing together at a time of adversity. Today, Somalia stands at a transformative moment. Through governance reforms, debt relief, and national recovery programs, we are turning fragility into resilience. Our economy is stabilizing, institutions are strengthening, and the hope of self-reliance is taking root. We have recently completed the HIPC initiative process of debt relief, unlocking access to international finance. We have launched our national transformation plan. At the center of it is the objective of poverty eradication and getting rid of hunger, linking growth to social protection, food security, and climate adaptation. And despite immense challenge, we have expanded social safety nets to reach families in the hardest hit regions. This progress is not a miracle. It is the outcome of partnership, perseverance, and the belief that hunger and poverty are not destiny, but conditions that we can overcome. In Somalia, hunger has rarely been about the absence of food alone. It was about the absence of peace and stability and the opportunity that would empower citizens. Past conflicts have disrupted livelihoods, displaced millions, and climate change has eroded the foundations of rural communities. Global inequalities have left fragile states like ours struggling to compete and adapt. Yet we know when we invest in people, in farmers, in women and youth, we build peace and prosperity together. Every school meal is an investment in stability. Every irrigation canal is a wall against despair. Every social protection payment is a vote in dignity. That's why the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty is so important. It brings moral clarity to our global agenda. That eradicating poverty is not a charity but justice, not an aspiration but an obligation. Ladies and gentlemen, Somalia fully endorses the objectives of this alliance. We are aligning our national priorities with its pillars of inclusive growth, sustainable food systems, and equitable partnerships. First, we are expanding our national social protection systems, which we began from scratch a few years ago. Our goal is to ensure that every Somali household is registered with a unified social safety net program and deliveries of cash transfer, nutrition support, and livelihood opportunities. Second, we're investing in local food production, from revitalizing irrigation schemes along the rivers to adapting and scaling up climate change in the fisheries and crop sector. Our strategy is to move from emergency food aid to sustainable food sovereignty. Third, we are empowering women and youth. We have enshrined gender equality in our constitution. We continue to ensure that women have access to land, credit, and representation in decision-making bodies. Because no society can defeat hunger with half of its population excluded from opportunity. And finally, we're linking humanitarian action to long-term development and peace-building cycles of dependency by creating pathways from relief to recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, while national commitments is essential, enduring hunger requires collective effort. We therefore call for a global architecture that recognizes the unique realities of fragile and conflict-affected states. Somalia and many countries like ours are disproportionately affected by shocks we did not create, and climate change, rising food prices, and debt burden are having compounded effect. We urge our partners to translate solidarity into action through increased concessional financing, debt swaps, and food security investments, direct support for social protection systems in fragile countries, and expanded climate finance access for adaptation and resilience. A fairer global trade system that gives African farmers and producers real market opportunities. We must move beyond the language of aid to the practice of shared responsibility. Hunger anywhere undermines stability everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, no discussion on hunger today is complete without confronting climate crisis. Somalia is on the front lines of the climate crisis impact. In the past 5 years alone, we have suffered the worst droughts in many decades, followed by devastating floods in living memory. Therefore, these are not isolated events, they are the new normal of a warming planet. We cannot ask our farmers to adapt without giving them the tools, access to water management, early warning systems, green technology, and affordable insurance. Equally, we cannot talk about hunger without addressing peace. Displaced farmers, conflict is displacing farmers, destroying markets, and driving hunger deeper than usual. That's why Somalia continues to pursue reconciliation, security reform, and community stabilization, because peace is the soil from which prosperity grows. The alliance must therefore integrate climate resilience and peace building into its operational DNA, ensuring that every dollar spent on food security also builds capacity for climate adaptation and social cohesion. Let me share a simple story in the district of Baydaba. I met a mother named Fartoon. After losing her livestock to droughts, she began receiving small monthly payments through Somalia's safety net program. With modest support, she bought seeds, planted vegetables, and sent her 2 children to school. Today, her family eats from their own garden, and her daughters dream of becoming doctors. This is what transformation looks like, not in spreadsheets or declarations, but in the dignity restored to one household at a time. If we scale up such stories 1,000,000 times over, we will change the trajectory of nations. Ladies and gentlemen, the Global Alliance must not become another platform for promises. It must be a mechanism for measurable results. Let us set bold but achievable goals. Zero hunger in our lifetime, not as a slogan, but as a plan. Universal social protection coverage by 2030, climate resilience food systems that leave no one behind. Let me conclude by acknowledging the role and the leadership of the Brazilian government, the President of the UN Assembly, and the State of Qatar in bringing the practitioners, the nations, and the financial institutions together so that we can collectively forge a vision and a plan. Hunger, getting rid of hunger and poverty is an economic issue, a political issue, and a societal issue, and it needs an integrated approach, and Somalia is willing to share its experiences with the rest of the countries here and institutions, while also learning from others. Thank you very much.
شكرا لكم سعادة نائب رئيس الوزراء على هذه الملاحظات الملهمة. سنستمع الآن إلى قائمة رفيعة المستوى من المداخلات في هذه المناقشة المهمة، واسمحوا لي أن أنوه وأذكر جميع المتحدثين التكرم بالالتزام بوقت التحدث المخصص لهم وهو 4 دقائق، وذلك للسماح لجميع الأصوات بأن تسمع بالإضافة إلى العديد من طلبات المداخلة. ونبدأ معكم بدعوة لسعادة السيد مانويل ماريرو كروز رئيس وزراء جمهورية كوبا، فليتفضل سعادته لإلقاء كلمته.
Excelencias, agradezco al Estado de Qatar por su hospitalidad y para acoger esta primera reunión de líderes de la Alianza Global contra el Hambre y la Pobreza. Hago extensivo mi agradecimiento a Brasil por su liderazgo y por la convocatoria a esta iniciativa. Vivimos un escenario global crítico, derivado de un orden internacional injusto que incrementa las brechas entre los países y perpetúa las desigualdades. La pobreza extrema afecta anualmente a millones de personas en el mundo, creando un ciclo donde la falta de recursos condena a generaciones a la malnutrición, la hambruna y limita su capacidad productiva. Esta situación representa una barrera estructural para el desarrollo de los países, fundamentalmente los del sur. La actual arquitectura financiera internacional, la insostenible deuda externa, la desaceleración económica global, los efectos de la pandemia COVID-19 en las cadenas de suministros y los mercados laborales y el impacto acumulativo de los fenómenos climatológicos extremos han mermado la producción agrícola y alimentaria a nivel mundial. Los países en desarrollo son particularmente vulnerables a la volatilidad de los precios internacionales de los alimentos y los insumos agrícolas, fertilizantes y combustibles. La dependencia de las importaciones, sumada a la depreciación de las monedas locales, ejerce una presión insostenible sobre las balanzas comerciales y, consecuentemente, reduce la capacidad fiscal de los estados para implementar medidas robustas. La lucha contra el hambre y la pobreza se ve relegada ante un gasto militar desmedido e irracional. Tales recursos multimillonarios deberían destinarse al financiamiento al desarrollo. Solo en Gaza, más de 500.000 de personas enfrentan situación de hambruna, mientras el gobierno de los Estados Unidos continúa financiando y cobijando el genocidio de Israel. Excelencias, el criminal bloqueo impuesto por los Estados Unidos contra Cuba desde hace más de 6 décadas estrangula deliberadamente nuestra economía impactando de forma directa y severa en la seguridad alimentaria de los cubanos. Al obstaculizar el acceso a alimentos, insumos y financiamientos, el bloqueo constituye el principal obstáculo para la producción y adquisición de medicamentos. Pese a ello, mi país mantiene como prioridad fundamental la alimentación de nuestro pueblo, expresada en la Ley de Soberanía Alimentaria y Seguridad Alimentaria y Nutricional. Señoras y señores, desde Cuba, a pesar del cruel bloqueo que se nos impone y de los frecuentes fenómenos naturales como el devastador huracán Melissa que impactó el oriente cubano hace solo 4 días, trabajaremos para que esta alianza se consolide como el pilar fundamental de cooperación técnica, científica y formación de capital humano. Pueden contar con el modesto y solidario accionar de Cuba, seguros de que un mundo mejor es posible. Muchas gracias.
شكرا لكم سعادة رئيس الوزراء. أما الآن فاسمحوا لي أن أدعو إلى المنصة سعادة الدكتور مصطفى كمال مدبولي رئيس وزراء جمهورية مصر العربية، فليتفضل سعادته لإلقاء كلمته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب الدولة والمعالي رؤساء الحكومات والوزراء، السيدات والسادة الحضور، بداية أود أن أعرب عن خالص تقديري لدولة قطر الشقيقة لاستضافتها هذه القمة المهمة ولحفاوة الاستقبال وكرم الضيافة. كما أود أن أثني على الجهود المتميزة التي بذلتها الرئاسة المشتركة للبرازيل وأسبانيا في قيادة التحالف العالمي لمكافحة الجوع والفقر. السيدات والسادة، لا يزال الجوع والفقر من أكثر التحديات إلحاحاً في عصرنا، فأكثر من 2 مليار شخص حول العالم يعانون من انعدام الأمن الغذائي بدرجات متفاوتة، بينما يعاني شخص من بين كل 5 أشخاص في أفريقيا من الجوع يومياً. وتجسد المجاعة في غزة بوضوح كيف تدمر الصراعات حياة الأشخاص وتحرمهم من حقوقهم الأساسية. لقد جاءت القمة الدولية للسلام التي عقدت في مدينة شرم الشيخ الشهر المنقضي في توقيتها المناسب لإعادة ترسيخ السلام والاستقرار في منطقة الشرق الأوسط وبدء جهود التعافي وإعادة الإعمار في غزة. وتخطط مصر لاستضافة مؤتمر دولي حول التعافي المبكر وإعادة الإعمار والتنمية في غزة، وأدعوكم جميعا لحضوره. السيدات والسادة، يتقاطع الجوع والفقر مع تحديات هيكلية أخرى مثل ارتفاع مستويات الديون وتراجع المساعدات الإنمائية الرسمية ومحدودية فرص الوصول إلى التمويل الميسر. وتتطلب معالجة هذه التحديات نهجا شاملا يبدأ بإصلاح عاجل للهيكل المالي العالمي وتعزيز الحوكمة الاقتصادية العالمية. وعلى المستوى الوطني، أطلقت مصر أكثر مشروعات شبكة الأمان الاجتماعي طموحاً، وهي برنامج تكافل وكرامة الذي يستهدف تقديم مساعدات نقدية لأكثر من 7 مليون أسرة شهرياً للقضاء على الفقر وتقليل حدة الفقر لهذه الأسر، بالإضافة إلى برنامج حياة كريمة، وهو أكثر المشروعات طموحاً في تحقيق التنمية الشاملة والمستدامة لسكان الريف المصري، والذي سيستفيد منه أكثر من 60 مليون نسمة. وكل هذه البرامج بهدف التخفيف من آثار الإصلاحات الاقتصاد الكلي. وكما قلت، فإن مجموع ما استفيد ويستفيد من البرنامجين يتجاوز 60 مليون نسمة في مصر. بالإضافة إلى ذلك، تنفذ مصر مشروعاً قومياً للصوامع يهدف إلى زيادة السعة التخزينية للقمح والحبوب والحفاظ على احتياطي استراتيجي لتأمين احتياجات الدولة. ويشمل المشروع إنشاء نحو 50 صومعة في 17 محافظة لإضافة سعات تخزينية جديدة تصل إلى 1.5 مليون طن، ليتجاوز إجمالي الاحتياطات داخل مصر ما يقرب من 6 مليون طن. وتعمل مصر على مشروعات متخصصة لصغار المزارعين في زراعة القمح أيضا. وأخيرا وليس آخرا، أطلقت مصر أيضا مركز الأقصر التنسيقي من أجل تعزيز المرونة والابتكار ونشر المعرفة بجنوب مصر، بالشراكة مع برنامج الأغذية العالمي، فضلا عن العمل مع منظمة الأغذية والزراعة FAO لاستضافة مركز عالمي لتخزين الحبوب في المنطقة الاقتصادية لقناة السويس. أشكركم جميعا، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكرا لكم سعادة رئيس الوزراء. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة سعادة السيدة روكسانا مينزاتو، نائب الرئيس التنفيذي للحقوق الاجتماعية والمهارات وجودة التوظيف والاستعداد في الاتحاد الأوروبي، فلتتفضل مشكورة.
Excellencies, dear partners, let me thank Qatar for hosting the first leaders meeting of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, and Brazil for its steadfast leadership. 1 year after its launch, this alliance has become an invaluable platform for the world to unite in tackling hunger and poverty. The European Union stands firmly behind its key objectives. Through our Global Gateway strategy, we are supporting sustainable agri-food systems worldwide. For example, with projects to restore irrigation systems in Somalia and enhance agricultural value chains along the Lobito corridor connecting Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Zambia. Together with our member states, we have already mobilized 306 billion euros to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Yet, we all know the challenge is immense, with a 4 trillion euro annual financing gap to meet those goals. The Sevilla commitment calls for urgent collective action across all funding sources. The European Union is committed to doing its part and work towards common solutions. We are leveraging public funds to mobilize domestic resources and private investments and maintaining high levels of official development assistance. Last year, the European Union and its member states provided 42% of global official development assistance, around 95.5 billion euros. In an increasingly complex financing landscape, the ODA continues to play a crucial role in achieving the 2030 agenda. Our commitment demonstrates the efforts of the European Union and its member states to provide support to those in need. And we are pushing to reform the international financial architecture to make it more inclusive and more effective. Through this alliance, the European Union stands ready to work with all willing partners to put the fight against hunger, against poverty, against inequality at the heart of our global agenda. The commitment extends to crisis zones like Gaza. Since 2008, our Pegasus mechanism has challenged around 670 million euros from the European Union, from member states and other donors, its cash transfers programs to combat hunger and poverty. The war collapsed Gaza's banking system, halting operations there, but talks are underway to restart once conditions allow. The ceasefire could unlock this vital lifeline, injecting quick liquidity to help those in desperate need. We are also taking action at home. Our current 7-year budget allocates around 5 billion euros to provide basic support, including food aid, to the most deprived. All EU member states have adopted the European Child Guarantee, ensuring at-risk children of poverty, of social exclusion, are able to access early childhood education and care, education, healthcare, nutrition, and housing. And next year, in 2026, we will present an ambitious EU anti-poverty strategy to address the many faces, the many dimensions of poverty, of social exclusion, and to work helping eradicate poverty in the European Union by 2050. We are looking forward to working together to advance the goals of this alliance, and I thank you.
شكرا لسعادتكم. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة سعادة السيد إيديل بايسالوف نائب رئيس مجلس الوزراء في جمهورية كرغستان، فليتفضل سعادته لإلقاء كلمته.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, on behalf of the Kyrgyz Republic, allow me first to thank the government of Brazil for its leadership and initiative, and brotherly Qatar, as well as our co-chair of Spain and other members of the Board of Champions for convening an excellent organization of today's meeting of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. Kyrgyzstan is honored to be part of this alliance. We see it not as yet another forum, but as a moral commitment. As President Lula da Silva has reminded the international community, hunger is not an accident of nature, it is a political choice. And ending it is therefore also a political choice. It is a question of dignity, justice, and political will. The Kyrgyz Republic is working hard to create fiscal space, defend our people from poverty, and invest in human potential. Under the leadership of His Excellency President Sadyr Japarov, the Kyrgyz Republic has delivered one of the fastest economic accelerations in the world over the past 5 years. Since 2021, we have more than doubled our GDP and tripled the size of the national budget. Over each of the last 3 years, our economy recorded real annual growth of 9%. This is not a one-time rebound, it is a sustained performance. This progress was not achieved by chance. It is the result of effective public administration, better governance, and a decisive action against corruption. We simplified tax administration, digitized government services, and closed loopholes with improved compliance. For the first time in many years, we closed the budget with a surplus 2.5% of GDP, giving us the freedom to reinvest in social protection, food security, instead of financing deficits. And the trend continues. In the first 9 months of 2025, GDP expanded by 10%. Our responsibility is to ensure that this new fiscal space reaches the people who need it most. Between 2021 and 2024, we carried out major increases in public sector wages. We also sharply increased social benefits, in some cases tripling them. For the first time in our history, we set the minimum pension at the level of the subsistence minimum. A few years ago, that seemed impossible. Today, it is constitutional policy. We are still addressing the social shock of the pandemic when poverty jumped to 33%. Rural areas remain the most vulnerable. Poverty in rural communities stands at 27%, and almost 2/3 of all people living in poverty are in the countryside. Every year, direct social assistance to low-income families with children covers roughly 400,000 of our citizens. We have launched an ambitious social housing construction, expanded state guarantees of free medical treatment, and initiated large rehabilitation programs. One of our most successful instruments is a social contract program launched in 2022. Instead of indefinite passive benefits, families receive a one-time startup grant to begin an income-generating activity, a small farm, a service, a trade. To date, more than 43,000 such contracts have been signed. There is an important gender dimension there. Over 94% of participants are women in rural areas. When you empower a rural woman, you stabilize an entire household. We see education as the most powerful anti-poverty tool. We are modernizing schools, improving teacher qualifications, and expanding vocational and technical education that leads to real job. We are also reshaping fiscal policy to protect health. We are aggressively increasing excise taxes on tobacco, alcohol, and sugar-sweetened products. Excellencies, across the world, hundreds of millions of people are struggling with hunger, poverty, and displacement. A tragedy that demands our shared humanity and urgent collective response. We must do everything in our power to alleviate their suffering and uphold the dignity of every human being. Yet today, we must also speak with special solidarity for the people of Palestine who are enduring a catastrophic man-made famine. The deliberate deprivation of food, medicine, and aid to an entire population constitutes not only a moral outrage, but a crime under international law, a form of collective punishment and genocide that the world must not ignore. Excellencies, let us use this alliance to share what works, to mobilize financing at scale, and to hold each other accountable, not only for speeches, but for outcomes in the lives of real families. Thank you, Co-Chair. Thank you.
شكرا لكم سعادة نائب رئيس مجلس الوزراء. أما الآن فدعوني أرحب بسعادة السيدة ساني جران لاسونين وزير الضمان الاجتماعي في فنلندا، فلتتفضل لإلقاء كلمتها.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 30 years after Copenhagen, our priorities remain clear. End poverty and hunger, ensure decent work, and build inclusive societies. The Doha Declaration renews these commitments, but without financing, they remain words. That's why the Seville Conference on Financing for Development matters. It gave us a roadmap to expand fiscal space and close the SDG financing gap. Investing in universal social protection is vital. Hunger is not just about food, it's about vulnerability. Social protection floors, child benefits, maternity protection, pensions stop shocks from becoming hunger and poverty. We support global efforts to develop inclusive social protection systems to advance Agenda 2030 with progress shaped by national context. The International Labour Organization has been instrumental in putting social protection on the global agenda and embedding it into international declarations such as Seville and Doha. We hope that social protection will be meaningfully reflected also in the climate discussions in Belém. Finland's history shows how social investments transform societies. We grew from poverty and malnutrition to well-being and equal opportunities. And one specific key driver was free school meals introduced in the 1940s. Every child received a nutritious meal at school, improving learning outcomes and enabling mothers to fully join the workforce, advancing gender equality. School meals were part of a bigger picture: free education, universal healthcare, and a fair tax system to fund these services. These investments build trust and a strong social contract, reducing poverty and creating resilience. Today, school meals linked to local food systems teach healthy and sustainable diets and reduce inequalities. Finland stands ready to work with partners to turn commitments into results. Globally, Finland is an active member of both the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty and the School Meals Coalition. With decreasing development funding landscape, it's imperative to increase national revenues, in particular taxation. Domestic resource mobilization is the most sustainable way to finance basic services. In Sevilla, Finland pledged support to initiatives to help countries broaden tax bases and curb evasion. Looking ahead, we remain committed to reducing well-being gaps and advancing the SDGs, because investing in human capital is the most efficient way to fight hunger and poverty. Thank you very much.
شكرا لكم سعادة الوزيرة. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة سعادة السيد هداية عبد اللطيف، نائب وزير العمل والحماية الاجتماعية للسكان في جمهورية أذربيجان، فليتفضل سعادة لإلقاء كلمته.
Distinguished Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to address you today. I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude to the governments of Qatar and Brazil for convening this important meeting of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. As a committed member of the Alliance, Azerbaijan fully supports this mission to eradicate hunger and poverty, reduce inequalities, and strengthen global partnership for sustainable development. Over a short period, Azerbaijan has transformed from transition economy to an upper middle income country with a high human development index. This progress has enabled our country to contribute as an emerging donor supporting nations in need. To coordinate our international assistance, the Azerbaijan International Development Agency was established in 2011. Since then, Azerbaijan has provided humanitarian and development aid to over 140 countries, including 43 of the 44 least developed countries. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Azerbaijan supported more than 80 countries with medical supplies and vaccines. We also invest in youth through the Heydar Aliyev's International Education Grant program, which provides 500 scholarships for students from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Non-Alignment Movement, and the Small Island Development States. At the national level, Azerbaijan's social policy remains strongly people-centered. The poverty rate has fallen from 9.1% in 2010 to 5.3% in 2024. Our targeted social assistance system for low-income families has doubled its eligibility threshold since 2019 and now stands 9.5 times higher than in 2006. 5 major social reform packages have been benefited around 4 million citizens, increasing wages, pensions, and social benefits several-fold. To enhance efficiency and transparency, Azerbaijan established those centers, an innovative model integrating 161 social services through a single platform. These centers have served 3.9 million citizens with 98.4% satisfaction rate. The DOST model has drawn strong international interest, and Azerbaijan stands ready to share experience and model with partner countries. Ladies and gentlemen, social and public security remains at the heart of Azerbaijan's development vision. Through the Great Return Program, large-scale reconstruction is enabling forcibly displaced people to return to the liberated lands and rebuild sustainable livelihoods. In conclusion, Azerbaijan reaffirms its commitment to the principles and objectives of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty and to the goals on 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you.
شكرا لكم سعادتكم. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة السيد كريس إلمور، وكيل وزارة الدولة البرلماني في مكتب الخارجية والكومنولث والتنمية في المملكة المتحدة، فليتفضل.
Excellencies, colleagues, friends, thank you to the Alliance for convening this crucial meeting, to the Qatari government for their hospitality, and to Brazil and Spain for their continued leadership. Our collective efforts to act against hunger and poverty matter more than ever in a turbulent world. And let us be honest, Keeping pace with the scale of the challenge requires a new approach. That is why the UK is acting and changing how we work. We're moving from a donor to long-term investor, partnering with countries to unlock agri-food growth, build resilient food systems and mobilize private capital. We're shifting from delivering services to helping countries build systems that last, drawing on UK expertise to support locally led solutions, and that's why we are steadfast in our support of the Alliance and a proud Vice Chair, because it offers a new model for international cooperation, demand-led, country-owned and focused on delivery. And at the heart of that model is a razor-sharp focus on delivering better value for money through better coordination so that every penny is helping those in need. These fast-track partnerships are already showing what is possible, and they are exactly the kind of locally driven, inclusive and impact-focused partnerships we need more of. I'm pleased to share that the UK is helping deliver just that. In Ethiopia, we're providing technical assistance to boost livestock productivity and rural incomes. In Zambia, we signed a poverty reduction pledge last year. And today, I'm delighted to announce the launch of a new 6-year Zambia poverty reduction programme worth up to almost £40 million. This will strengthen social protection systems that build climate resilience and help families find pathways out of poverty. And that's not all. We're delivering on our commitments and leveraging more private funds for agribusiness. Today, I'm pleased to announce a new UK match fund through the Common Fund for Commodities to support small, sustainable agribusinesses across sub-Saharan Africa. This is part of an exciting portfolio of UK agri-food innovative finance, and these are not isolated projects, but part of a broader shift towards smarter, more strategic partnerships and investments. Now, while the UK remains a major ODA provider, we know that public finance alone will not be enough. So the UK is supporting reform of the global financial system and better integration of funding streams. We co-sponsored the Seville Platform for Action on Financing for Sustainable Development Goals 1 and 2, and are providing senior expertise to design pooled mechanisms so we all get more for our money in the right places. Let me end by once again applauding Brazil for their leadership in driving global action on hunger and poverty. It is now up to all of us to build a system that works for the poorest and keeps hunger and poverty at the heart of our global agenda. Thank you.
شكرا لكم السيد إلمر. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة السيد ماكسيمو توريرو، كبير الاقتصاديين في منظمة الأغذية والزراعة التابعة للأمم المتحدة.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to the Alliance and the Brazilian government for organizing this and for, of course, leading the Global Alliance, to Spain and to the Qatar government for organizing the first leaders meeting. Despite progress in some regions, hunger remains unacceptably high. In 2024, 673 million people are in hunger. 8.2% of the global population face hunger. Although there is a light increase, still is at levels that we cannot accept. Around 2.3 billion people were moderately or severe food insecure. Transforming the agri-food systems is essential to achieve SDG 1 and 2, the two core goals of the Global Alliance. Yet, the annual financing gap stands at an estimated $680 billion per year. Today, financing remains inadequate, fragmented, and poorly targeted to those most vulnerable to food crises. Fiscal space in low and lower middle-income countries is shrinking as debt servicing crowds out investments in resilience and food security. Colleagues, this is where having the three pillars of the support mechanisms of the Global Alliance are essential. The policy basket will tell us what and how to do it based on best practice and solid evidence, as it was mentioned before. Second is the action at the country level, because the countries is where we need to transform and to work with them, and they have to lead this transformation. But also, especially, is the financing pillar, to assure investments from IFIs, development agencies, development banks, is coordinated to the policy basket at the country level. If we know what to do, we need to coordinate and converge that financing into those type of actions. A particular alarming figure is that only 4% of the global climate financing is directed to agri-food systems. despite the sector being responsible for 1/3 of the global emissions and the front line for climate impacts, and especially the sector that provides the right to food. Building resilience is therefore not an option. It is the most cost-effective path to reduce vulnerability, hunger, and poverty, and prevent future crises. To overcome the current financing shortcomings, we need to do decisive transformation on 4 areas, and the Global Alliance can accelerate this shift. First, direct the right financing to the right countries. Countries most dependent on agri-food systems often have the least access to private finance. Increasing grants and high concessional lending, together with debt relief solutions such as debt swaps for food security, are essential to resolve this fiscal space. ODA remains critical, especially to fragile and low-income contexts. Second, reach the right people, small-scale producers and agri-food SMEs. These actors produce a large share of food in developing countries, yet 70% of their financing needs go unmet, and less than 1% of climate finance reaches them directly. Closing this gap, estimated to around 106 billion annually in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia alone, requires a stronger collaboration with national and private financial institutions. Third, we need to increase efficiency also from the countryside, and that means repurposing of existing agricultural support. Today, many subsidies and incentives don't align with sustainability and equity objectives. Repurposing these resources creates one of the fastest and most politically feasible sources of additional financing for a productive, nutritious, and low-emission future. Fourth, ensure financing is systemic, localized, and rights-based. Short-term fragmented projects cannot transform the systems. We need long-term nationwide investment approaches that integrate climate resilience, nutrition, and rural livelihoods, women and youth empowerment. Instruments such as blending finance guarantees, GSSS bonds, and parametric insurance are essential to scale these solutions. Let me highlight 2 FAO-led initiatives that embody these principles. First, the Financing for Shock-Driven Food Crisis Facility, the FSFC, launched under the G7 Italian presidency with WFP and OCHA, shifts the paradigm from just late humanitarian response to anticipatory, trigger-based action, which reduce both human suffering and financial costs. It increased effectiveness from each dollar investment to $7 investments and increased the coverage 10 times because of the bringing and the crowding in of the private sector through the reinsurance companies. The second one is the Hand in Hand initiative, which now covers 80 countries in the world, which is powered by FAO geospatial data platforms and investment planning tools, which supports countries with the highest poverty and hunger levels to identify through territorial approaches where each dollar of investment can generate the greatest impacts for income, resilience, and food security. This is the ways we can support countries, and we are currently supporting countries, and we are ready to keep supporting the Global Alliance. To conclude, if we want a world free from hunger and poverty, we must urgently scale climate-resilient investments in agri-food systems, coordinate financing so we achieve convergence towards the financing pillar, support countries facing the highest risks, and ensure that farmers, especially women and youth, are not left behind. We need to target the tail of the distribution, and that's where social protection plays a crucial role, but we also need to increase resilience and capacity of absorption of countries, and that means also agri-food system transformation and means investments in the agri-food systems. Unlocking and better targeting financing is not only economically sound, it is a moral imperative. Thank you very much.
شكرا لكم السيد توريرو. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة السيدة ماري بيت جودمان، نائب الأمين العام لمنظمة التعاون الدولي والاقتصادي والتنمية، فلتتفضل لإلقاء كلمتها.
Good morning. It is a true pleasure to be here with you as distinguished leaders and delegates. I am truly honored to join you for this inaugural leaders meeting of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. Today is our chance to turn ambition into real results, our ambition to lift people out of hunger and poverty. The OECD is proud to stand with you as a champion of the board and as part of the knowledge pillar of the Global Alliance. Allow me to highlight 5 areas where we believe that we can turn ambition into real progress. First, let's focus resources where they deliver the greatest impact. In 2023, only 13% of aid spending targeted poverty directly, and $16 billion US, which is about 10% of the official development assistance, went to food security. This gap is simply unsustainable. Donors need to make poverty reduction measurable in every program. They must protect the budgets that keep people healthy, educated, and nourished. And they should invest together in climate-smart, locally led agriculture and value chains that build food security and rural livelihoods. Second, we need to support partner countries, mobilize more, and to mobilize more predictable resources domestically. Expanding fiscal space is not only about aid, it is about credible domestic reforms. The OECD is supporting partners to strengthen tax administration capacity, broaden the tax base fairly, and reduce leakages so governments can sustainably finance anti-poverty priorities. We also help governments design people-centered transitions that pair climate action with stronger social protection so that no one is left behind. This matters because the gaps are stark. For example, informal workers make up 60% of the global workforce. Yet in 59 developing and emerging economies, only 37% of those workers are covered by social protection. And of that, just 25% of the informal workers have coverage. Through our social dialogue on policy and social protection, countries share real solutions to strengthen coverage and resilience on things like cash transfers and flexible insurance. Our next meeting with the ILO and World Bank will focus on financing social protection through fair taxation and more effective aid. Third, let's make every dollar, every rupee, every euro, every yen count and be tracked. Total official support for sustainable development, known as TOSD, used by over 120 providers, including the multilateral development banks and South-South actors. This institution, TOSD, tracks public and private resources mobilized to fight hunger and poverty using common definitions and methodologies. This shared evidence base can underpin the Alliance's basket for trusted policy measures and help align financing with country priorities. Fourth, we need to work together to deliver, not duplicate. As a champion of the board, we have leveraged our Development Assistance Committee to spotlight the Alliance. We've briefed its community of practice on poverty and inequalities and are aligning reinforcing delivery through the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, from the Busan Partnership Forum to the ongoing monitoring. So cooperation is country-led, results-focused, and transparent. Finally, let's safeguard food systems and regional resilience with real-time data and coordinated action. And of course, as the OECD, you know we always start with the data. Through the Agricultural Market Information System, we strengthen food market transparency and rapid policy response. The Food Crisis Prevention Network, which is a joint initiative of the Sahel and West Africa Club and the Permanent Interstate Committee for Drought Control in the Sahel, this institution provides data, codes for good contact, and a platform for coordination. Following the 2022 high-level meeting, it helped unlock 4.75 billion euros in pledges. This is what effective regional problem solving can look like. These are lessons we can build on as the Global Alliance moves from design to delivery. Brazil's leadership brings us to this pivotal moment. Let's rebalance aid, expand fiscal space, and deliver results through transparent cooperation. The OECD stands ready with the data, the standards, and the convening power to help translate budgets into action and action into better lives. We look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
شكرا لك. شكرا للسيدة ماري. أما الآن فدعوني مرة أخرى أود أن أنوه على جميع المتحدثين الأفاضل بضرورة الالتزام بالوقت المخصص وهو 4 دقائق. أما الآن فأدعو إلى المنصة السيد بيدرو أوليفيرا نائب رئيس معهد كامويس للتعاون واللغة في الجمهورية البرتغالية. السيد أوليفيرا الكلمة لك.
Honorable co-chairs of the Global Alliance, Your Excellencies, distinguished leaders, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to address this first leaders meeting of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. So let me extend our deepest gratitude to the State of Qatar for its generous hospitality and to the leadership of Brazil and Spain for their stewardship of the Alliance. So meeting on the eve of the second World Summit for Social Development reminds us that fighting hunger and poverty is the very foundation of social progress. Our task is not only urgent, it is the moral compass and political challenge of our time. Excellencies, we are given the opportunity to address a central question for development: how to open fiscal space and mobilize financing for lasting social transformation. The challenge is twofold. First, to create space, fiscal space, through fairer, more efficient and transparent financial systems that serve people and not debt. Second, to mobilize resources at scale and direct them where they provide the greatest human impact. We believe that domestic public resources are the backbone of sustainable development. They provide stability, sovereignty, and the means to invest in education, but also in health and social protection. Yet, for many countries, that service exceeds social spending. So the Compromiso de Sevilla, which Portugal has proudly endorsed, sets a new course of direction. It calls for responsible lending and borrowing, debt for development swaps, and debt pause clauses that protect nations in crisis. Moreover, Portugal believes that without fiscal space, there is no true ownership of development. Supporting partner countries in building effective, transparent, and equitable tax systems is an investment in their ability to mobilize domestic resources, reduce external dependence, and accelerate progress towards the 2030 agenda. So through our bilateral and triangular cooperation, particularly with Portuguese-speaking countries, we support partners to collect more and spend better. We invest in capacity building for debt management, transparent budgeting, and modernized revenue systems. We are also championing international tax justice, supporting the OECD's two-pillar solution and the call for UN Convention on International Tax Cooperation. Combating illicit financial flows is essential to restore fairness and public trust. Excellencies, Portugal's commitment to this alliance is solid. As Vice Chair of the Core Group and a founding member of the Board of Champions, we match words with predictable action. Our multi-annual contribution of $1.8 million reflects just that, ensuring stable support to the Alliance's support mechanism till 2030. Looking ahead, we are exploring technical cooperation under the fast-track initiatives in Palestine, notably in the framework of the Child Guarantee in the RIFC initiative. So this prospective engagement aims to share Portugal's experience in building integrated social protection systems for children and families, drawing from our own national expertise in social resilience. Excellencies, again, we are in Doha to move from consensus to commitment. Let us ensure that the ambition of this alliance, the outcomes of the World Social Summit, and the spirit of Sevilla and Belém in COP30 converge in a single, coherent direction. Portugal will remain an active, predictable, and committed partner in making our shared vision a reality for the most vulnerable. Thank you.
شكرا للسيد أوليفيرا. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة السيد جوزيف موتاري الأمين الرئيسي في جمهورية كينيا، فليتفضل.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the people of Kenya, I reaffirm our unwavering commitment to poverty reduction and hunger eradication. Kenya joined more than 100 countries at the G20 Global Alliance Summit in the year 2024 and issued a statement of commitment aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, the Constitution of Kenya 2010, Vision 2030, and the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. Kenya has made significant strides in strengthening the legal and policy framework for social protection. The enactment of the Social Protection Act 2025, the Social Protection Policy 2023, and the Persons with Disabilities Act 2025 marks a major milestone in institutionalizing and mainstreaming social protection within the National Development Agenda. These frameworks ensure access to regular income, good security programs, and livelihood opportunities, helping households transition from poverty to self-reliance. Furthermore, Kenya has expanded the Consolidated Cash Transfer Program, increasing the number of beneficiaries from 1.2 million to 1.7 million in the year 2023. Demonstrating the government's commitment to strengthening social assistance coverage, the government of Kenya has also enhanced the cash transfer delivery systems, transitioning payments from commercial banks to mobile money platforms and e-wallets, thereby ensuring faster, safer, and more efficient access to stipends by beneficiaries. Excellencies, in addition, under the Hunger Safety Net program, Kenya constitutes private, regular, and emergency cash transfers to vulnerable households in arid and semi-arid lands. This program currently supports hundreds of thousands of households in ASAL counties, providing practical income that enhances food security, builds resilience, and mitigates the effects of drought. Through this initiative, the government has been able to protect livelihoods, prevent hunger, and promote community stability in drought-prone regions. Excellencies, we have also scaled up and expanded the Economic Inclusion Program from a pilot in 5 counties to 25 counties, targeting 26,000 households. In addition, the program has been integrated to include a sustainable and diversified livelihoods, climate resilience, and the generation of decent jobs for vulnerable and poor households. The program aims to graduate participants from extreme poverty to improved income and asset ownership, better access to credit, enhanced food security, and greater social inclusion. The government of Kenya has also developed the enhanced single registry and expanded the social registry, which currently hosts data for over 4.4 million vulnerable households, representing an estimated 17 million individuals. This registry collects, updates, and links data on vulnerable persons and households, enabling programs to effectively identify and provide services to beneficiaries. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Kenya remains committed to enhancing partnerships. So far, Kenya has collaborated with multi and bilateral agencies to co-finance programs, share knowledge and technical expertise, and reduce risk in implementation. Despite this tremendous progress, challenges remain, particularly in achieving sustainable financing. A large number of vulnerable individuals and households are eligible for social protection interventions, yet limited resources constrain the government's ability to onboard all observing beneficiaries. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, as I conclude, Kenya strongly affirms and acknowledges that social protection is not an act of charity, but a global imperative. Let us move forward with renewed resolve and urgency, ensuring that every commitment made translates into tangible improvements in the lives of vulnerable groups. I thank you.
شكرا لكم السيد موتاري. أما الآن فأدعو السيدة لورا تيمبسون مساعد المدير العام لمنظمة العمل الدولية فلتتفضل.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, queridos Eva y Wellington, before addressing the core topic of this high-level debate, allowed me to congratulate the government of Brazil and the transition team for their dedication, collaborative spirit, and remarkable speed in setting up the Global Alliance's governance structure and operations for country support. ILO is proud to be a member of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. The global consensus regarding the importance of social protection for fighting hunger and poverty is well reflected in the Alliance's policy basket, which contains numerous social protection interventions. The key question that arises is how to finance these policies. I am sure you are all familiar with the ILO estimates of the cost of guaranteeing at least a basic level of social security, a social protection floor. According to our calculations, low and middle income countries require an additional US 1.4 trillion or 3.3% of the aggregate GDP of these countries for 2024 per annum to have a social protection floor. This overall figure includes 2% of GDP for essential healthcare and 1.3% of GDP for 5 social protection cash benefits for children, maternity, disability, unemployment, and on age, with great variations across countries. By reinforcing their social protection systems, including a solid social protection floor, countries can advance social development and social justice and renew their social contracts. This shift from merely alleviating poverty to preventing it is essential for social cohesion and development. Firmly rooted in a rights-based approach, the ILO flagship program on social protection floors for all has been able to support, in the last 4 years, 149 institutional changes in 50 countries and territories, and the extension of social protection coverage for 50 million people. In this context, I would like to make 3 points. The first one is that social protection expenditure is not a cost, but it is an investment with multiple social and economic returns. Social protection benefits stabilize aggregate demand and generate economic multiplier effects. For example, we estimate that every dollar invested in social protection today can increase GDP on average by $1.8 within 2.5 years, underscoring the long-term growth benefits of social protection investment. Second, it is clear that formalization of employment and enterprises needs to be at the heart of any resource mobilization strategy for social protection. And why is that? Because formalization facilitates an increase in the coverage of social insurance as well as tax revenues to finance non-contributory benefits while enhancing productivity. Finally, other actions to take, as extensively discussed in Sevilla, range from tripling multilateral development banks lending, managing and restructuring sovereign debt, and doubling ODA to combat illicit financial flows that deprive countries of resources to invest in social protection systems, and the important work that is now being pursued through deliberations on the UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. Combining these efforts will enable countries to make the target of extending social protection coverage by at least 2% points per year, as agreed in the Compromiso de Sevilla and reaffirmed in the draft Doha Declaration. With the extension of effective social protection coverage at this rate, countries will be in a much stronger position to prevent poverty and reduce hunger, laying the foundation for a dynamic economy and inclusive society. Thank you very much.
شكرا لك السيدة لورا. دعوني الآن أرحب بالسيد يوهان ساتوب وكيل وزارة الدولة البرلماني في جمهورية ألمانيا الاتحادية، فليتفضل.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, friends, 673 million people. Every 12th person on this planet is suffering from hunger. We all know these numbers, and yet they are worth repeating because they are not merely statistics. They are the harsh reality for millions of people that struggle each day to feed themselves and their children. Germany remains a strong and committed partner in the fight against hunger and poverty. We are making a life of dignity for all a priority of our international development policy. And few things undermine a life of dignity as much as hunger and poverty do. We build on the work of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. Its goals are at the very heart of our development policy. And we are proud that Germany was the first G20 member to join the alliance at the Hamburg Sustainability Conference last year. I would like to thank Brazil, Mr. Diaz and Mr. Godinho, who are here today, for their leadership and for ensuring that the Global Alliance for Food Security, which Germany, together with the World Bank and other partners, promoted, transitioned so smoothly over to this alliance. This means that our important work, for example, on the Global Food and Nutrition Security Dashboard, can be continued. Germany stands ready to supporting the alliance, reinforcing our commitment to multilateralism that we confirmed just recently in the Committee on World Food Security. First, through our engagement for the transformation of agriculture and food systems, Germany has long been among the leading donors in food security and social protection. Second, we scale up our support to school meals. They are one of the most powerful levers to improve child nutrition and learning outcomes. And as our cooperation, for example, with the government of Sierra Leone and Laos shows, they can boost local food production and integrate climate-smart technologies. Third, we continued our support to the UN Global Accelerator and the World Bank Compass, the MGA. One of our priorities here is to focus even stronger on climate resilience and social protection in fragile contexts. Fourth, we renew our engagement in the World Bank managed Sahel Adaptive Social Protection Program, because social protection is one of the most effective ways to fight poverty and hunger. And we are ready to endorse the Belém Declaration, and the final discussion has to be made on the EU level. And last but not least, I am happy to announce that Germany stands ready to support several of the Alliance's fast-track country implementation plans. And I am particularly happy today to announce that Germany is providing 2 million euros to the support mechanism, thereby strengthening the backbone of the alliance and its daily work. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenges we face are enormous. Ending hunger and poverty not only requires that 673 million people win their daily struggles to feed themselves and their children. It requires for us, as international partners, to rethink and transform food and agricultural systems, to strengthen social protection systems worldwide, and to support the resilience of rural communities in the face of shocks such as natural disasters. Let us join our efforts to advance these goals. You can count on Germany as a reliable partner in the fight against hunger and poverty. Thank you very much.
شكرا لسعادتكم السيد ساتوف. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة سعادة السيد فيصل علي إبراهيم سفير جمهورية أثيوبيا الفيدرالية الديمقراطية لدى دولة قطر.
Excellency Wellington Dias, Chair and Minister of Social Development of Brazil, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, a proud member of the Board of Champions and a program country under the fast-track implementation program of the Global Alliance. At the outset, allow me to express Ethiopia's profound appreciation to the Federative Republic of Brazil for its exemplary leadership in advancing the global agenda of poverty eradication and food security within the framework of the G20. We equally extend our heartfelt gratitude to the State of Qatar for hosting this important meeting. Holding this dialogue in Doha underscores Qatar's growing role in promoting strategic partnership for food security and agricultural transformation. Excellencies, adequate and predictable financing is the cornerstone of effective national food security programs. In Ethiopia, our flagship initiative, Yelmat Rufat program, meaning the bounty of basket, targets over 20,000 villages across the country and embodies an inclusive, people-centered approach designed to empower smallholder farmers. This ambitious program demands substantial resources and supportive macroeconomic policies that encourage private sector participation in agriculture and food systems. It also requires targeted budget allocation to expand access to agricultural inputs, mechanization, and modern technologies. The government of Ethiopia attached paramount importance to domestic resource mobilization. Nearly 4% of our national budget is allocated to agriculture and rural development. To complement this effort, we have enacted fiscal and monetary policies that incentivize banks to allocate financing to agricultural sector. Microfinance institutions have been strengthened, particularly at the local level, providing essential business development services and linking producers with financial institutions. Private sector investment in agriculture and agro-industry is being scaled up to attract new financial flows to enhance productivity. Public-private partnership models also applied across agricultural chains. This model has yielded tangible results, most notably in the development of agro-industrial parks and the establishment of a fertilizer production plant, recently inaugurated by His Excellency Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. This landmark project, financed through African capital, will become one of the largest fertilizer facilities in Africa. Excellencies, International cooperation remains indispensable. Ethiopia sincerely appreciates all partners that have announced pledges of technical and financial support for the Yelmat Trufat program. We especially commend the African Development Bank for its steadfast partnership, including the USD 65 million concessional financing dedicated to the poultry value chain. We also thank the government of Spain, World Vision, United Kingdom, UNIDO, FAO for the pledges. We express our deep appreciation for the pledge of Federative Republic of Brazil to train over 480 agricultural extension workers that have far-reaching impact. Excellencies, despite these efforts, the fiscal space of many developing countries, including Ethiopia, remains constrained by debt challenges, which continue to impede national investments in food security and poverty reduction. We therefore urge for the full implementation of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda and the Seville Declaration. Ethiopia calls for enhanced debt solidarity, including expanded access to concessional finance, debt cancellation, debt for development swaps, and other non-debt creating financial instruments to enable sustainable national progress. In conclusion, Ethiopia reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the objectives of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. We stand ready to work with all partners to ensure that no person, community, or nation is left behind in our collective pursuit of a world free from hunger and deprivation. I thank you.
شكرا لكم سعادة السفير. أرحب الآن إلى المنصة بالسيد فرديناندو ريغاليا مدير القطاع الاجتماعي في بنك التنمية للبلدان الأمريكية، فليتفضل.
Excellencies, distinguished partners, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to address this esteemed assembly on behalf of the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB. Let me begin by expressing our gratitude to the State of Qatar for hosting the First Leaders Summit and for its strong partnership with the Inter-American Development Bank. I also extend thanks to the co-chairs of the Board of Champions, Brazil and Spain, and for the to the support mechanism, Mr. Godinho, for the progress achieved since the launch of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. The IDB fully supports the mission of the Global Alliance and its core objective, eradicating hunger, ending poverty, and reducing inequality. These goals are central to our global commitment reflecting SDG 1, 2, and 10. The new IDB institutional strategy objectives are closely aligned to the Alliance goals: to eliminate extreme poverty, achieve zero hunger, and foster more equitable societies. As active member of the Board of Champions, we have committed to providing technical assistance and mobilizing financing for country-led strategy aligned with the policy basket, as well as delivering tangible support through the fast-track implementation initiative, particularly in Haiti. To translate this commitment into action, the IDB has pledged up to $25 billion in financing between 2025 and 2030 for country-led programs drawn from the Alliance policy basket. We are already making some progress. In 2025, we delivered $4.1 billion in financing to support water and sanitation for vulnerable communities, maternal, neonatal, and child health and nutrition programs, early childhood development and basic education program, school feeding and cash transfer program. These investments have real impact, and let me give you some examples. In Ecuador, a $70 million financing will expand access to clean water and sanitation for over 85,000 families in rural Cuenca. In Haiti, a $100 million grant will improve maternal, neonatal, and child health and other basic health services for 750,000 people. In Honduras, a blending of $55 million loan with $12 million grant will enhance education and school meal for more than 50,000 children in vulnerable municipalities including indigenous and Afro-Honduran communities. Looking ahead, our 2026 pipeline includes over $6 billion in new investment aligned with the policy basket, which is a clear evidence that we are on track to meet our $25 billion commitment by 2030. And this momentum extends to the Fast Track initiative in Haiti, which we will discuss this afternoon. Eradicating poverty and hunger requires innovative financial mechanisms that can mobilize greater public, multilateral, and private resources. The ADB is leveraging its expertise to deploy sovereign guarantee for debt swap to generate fiscal space for this investment, support thematic bonds, and structure blended financial scheme combining grants and loans. These instruments, which have been applied in the climate finance space, are now being applied to education, health, and nutrition investment across the region, reinforcing our commitment to development impact at scale. Together, these efforts exemplify partnership in action, leveraging country leadership, sharing knowledge, and aligning finance to maximize impact. The ADB engagement in the Global Alliance reflects our belief that ending hunger and poverty is achievable when we act collectively, decisively, and at scale. I thank you.
شكرا لكم السيد ريغاليا. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة السيد رون هارتمان مدير شعبة الانخراط العالمي والشراكات وتعبئة الموارد في الصندوق الدولي للتنمية الزراعية، فليتفضل.
Excellencies, distinguished guests and partners, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on behalf of IFAD today. As we've heard in our opening session, tackling hunger and poverty is not only the right thing to do, it's smart policy. Investing in reducing poverty and hunger in rural areas boosts incomes, promotes stability, and addresses the root causes of conflict and forced migration. But this doesn't happen by accident. It requires targeted investment, strong leadership, and real partnerships. Too often, as we've heard this morning, development finance fails to reach vulnerable rural communities, the first mile of our food systems, and where 80% of the world's poor live and reside. Trickle-down approaches don't work for vulnerable rural families. With development assistance under pressure as needs rise, it's more urgent than ever to use every dollar effectively and mobilize new resources and finance for those that mean it most. So what do we actually have to do? First, put country ownership and people at the center. Development finance must align behind national priorities. And this means listening to governments, supporting their priorities, and providing flexible financing that responds to local realities. Sustainable and inclusive rural transformation also depends on strong local institutions, women's groups, farmer organizations, Indigenous persons representatives, and rural enterprises. Secondly, we need to make development finance work for those most marginalized rural communities. Blended finance must be simple, transparent, and focused on results. Public funds must better de-risk investments and attract private capital, especially for those underserved areas. And this also means rethinking debt, supporting domestic resource mobilization, and ensuring concessional finance reaches those that need it most. Third, we need to coordinate better and hold ourselves accountable for results. Too often, us as development partners, public and private, work in silos, and this results in fragmentation and missed opportunities. The Alliance's approach, bringing partnerships together around national priorities and coordinated financing, is a step in the right direction. But we must go further, leveraging our financing, aligning efforts behind country-led plans, and holding ourselves accountable for results that matter to poor and vulnerable rural people. As IFAD launches its 14th replenishment next year, we offer an investment platform for long-term investment in food security, in rural jobs, and resilience. For every dollar invested in IFAD, we mobilize over $6 of investment on the ground. And for Alliance members, this means greater demand-led impact, stronger partnerships, and a direct channel to invest and deliver results where they matter most. To sum up, a rural transformation doesn't happen by accident, and development finance doesn't trickle down. It takes leadership, it takes coordination, and it takes a willingness to do things differently. The Global Alliance, of course, gives us a chance to break old habits and put people at the centre of our fight against hunger and poverty. And we at IFAD stand ready to work with all of you to make this a reality. Thank you.
شكرا لكم السيد هارتمان. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة سعادة السيد صلاح الدين نعمان، مدير عام المشاريع الخاصة وصندوق التعاون الدولي والممثل الدائم لجمهورية بنغلاديش الشعبية لدى الأمم المتحدة، فليتفضل.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, let me begin by thanking the Government of Qatar and Government of Brazil for organizing this event. Bangladesh is honored to be a founding member of the Global Alliance. Hunger and poverty is the gravest moral test of our times. In a world that spends $2.7 trillion a year on weapons, it is beyond any ethical standard to accept nearly 673 million people go hungry every day, as mentioned by my German colleague. Excellencies, in Bangladesh, we have lifted millions out of poverty. And our story reaffirms that hunger and poverty can be defeated through empathy and determination. We made strategic investment in agriculture, women's empowerment, social protection, and innovation. 5 decades of constant attention has resulted in attainment of self-sufficiency in food in a country with severe scarcity of land mass. However, in today's highly interconnected world, we are not immune from challenges that originate beyond our borders. Our vulnerability to climate change as a low-lying country is well known. We often face supply chain disruptions triggered by pandemics, conflicts, and unpredictable export-import policies elsewhere. For countries like ours, debt distress continues to erode our fiscal space, forcing us to curtail investment in health and social protection of our lives. As if that's not enough, we are hosting 1.3 million Rohingyas, posing enormous economic, social, and environmental stress on Bangladesh. Now, as a graduating LDC, we face additional challenges lying ahead with regard to trade preferences and access to concessional financing. Excellencies, global poverty and hunger are not and have never been caused by scarcity of food. They result from systemic failure driven by unchecked greed for wealth, concentration, and unbalanced competition for power. Moreover, the developed countries have continued to fail in fulfilling their commitments. A $4 trillion annual financing gap have kept the SDGs severely off track. Against this backdrop, allow me to highlight a few points. First, the fiscal space must be expanded through debt relief and debt pause mechanisms in times of crisis. Second, the civil commitment of FFT4 must be fulfilled in letter and spirit. Third, the global financial architecture must be reformed to make development financing fair and accessible. Illicit financial flows must be curbed and international tax reforms ensured. Fourth, the investment in people must remain central with integrated social protection systems such as school meals, cash transfers, and nutrition programs. Fifth, we must promote innovative financing solutions like microcredit and social business, which have transformed millions of lives through youth entrepreneurship, women's empowerment, innovation, and digital inclusion. Finally, peace and stability must be recognized as prerequisites for food security. Conflicts destroy agriculture, displace people, and weaponize hunger. The starvation in Gaza is a grave alert that food must never be politicized. Excellencies, we vision a world of 3 zeros: zero carbon, zero wealth concentration, and zero unemployment. Ending hunger and poverty is not charity, it is justice. And it is achievable if we act with courage, coherence, and conscience. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
شكرا لكم سعادتكم. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة السيدة لي شن، نائب المدير العام للمركز الدولي للحد من الفقر ونائب رئيس لجنة الإبطال في جمهورية الصين الشعبية، فلتتفضل.
Distinguished co-chairs, Mr. Wellington Diaz and Ms. Eva Granados, Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great pleasure to join you in Doha for the first leaders meeting. Actually, poverty is a global challenge. It has been mentioned once and again by the leaders and speakers this morning. But although we have fought hard to tackle poverty, but still it's a pity there are still 820 million people living under the poverty line all around the world. The Chinese government has consistently prioritized poverty reduction and rural development in its governance agenda for more than 7 decades. Under the leadership and guidance of our President, Mr. Xi Jinping, China achieved a complete victory over the fight against poverty in 2020. So we eliminated extreme poverty once and for all. If we retrospect from the 1949, when the majority of Chinese population lived under the poverty line, so we lifted 800 million our population out of poverty. So what do we do? The historic progress enabled China to realize the poverty reduction goal set in the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development 10 years ahead of schedule. So China's eradication of poverty stems from its unwavering commitment to a people-centered development philosophy. As mentioned by our government, people's aspirations for a better life is our ultimate goal. So our success also derives from the implementation of a targeted poverty alleviation strategy designed to respond to 5 questions. First, how to identify the poor. And second, who is designated to help them, the poor. And third one, how to help them through tailor-made projects and programs. And fourth one, how to evaluate that they can exit from poverty. And last but foremost, how to prevent relapse into poverty. So after we implemented the right strategy, we eradicated absolute poverty. So from 2021 to 2025, the Chinese government enacted the Rural Revitalization Promotion Law. So we embarked on a new stage to consolidate the progress while continue to promote the development of the formerly impoverished regions and promote new progress toward achieving common prosperity for all our population. Ladies and gentlemen, at the 19th G20 Leaders Summit held in Brazil last year, Chinese President Xi Jinping stressed like this: the poverty issue in developing countries is solvable, just like fledgling birds can take flight early and soar high. China's success in eradicating poverty proves that other developing countries can also achieve the goal. So this constitutes the global significance of China's victory over poverty. Guided by this vision, we'll continue to advance the Global Development Initiative and the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Will actively expand global partnerships for poverty alleviation and development, strengthen international consensus, and deepen exchanges of experience and knowledge. And also will strengthen personnel exchange, capacity building, joint researches, and project collaboration. Over the past year, since its establishment, the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty has made remarkable progress across all areas of its work, thanks to the active participation of its members, and also we must thank the dedicated efforts of the Alliance support mechanism. With the convening of the first leaders meeting today, the Alliance is entering a new stage of growth and cooperation. China will, as always, remain an active participant and a steadfast supporter of the Alliance work. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you so much.
شكرا لك السيدة لي. أما الآن فدعوني أرحب بالسيدة كيت هامبتون الرئيس التنفيذي لمؤسسة صندوق استثمار الأطفال، فلتتفضل.
Good morning, Excellencies, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be here today representing the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, the world's largest philanthropy focused on improving children's lives. And first, of course, I want to congratulate Brazil and Spain on their inspirational leadership and the government of Qatar for hosting us so generously today. We recognize that global hunger is clearly one of the most important challenges of our time, and projections indicate that nearly 1 billion people will still remain at risk of severe food insecurity by 2030. And as many speakers have already articulated, women and children are by far the worst impacted. Chronic undernutrition due to the inadequate quantity and quality of food have devastating impacts on children. 48 million children today are stunted, which means that they face lifelong development setbacks. And 45 million are dangerously thin and wasting at very high risk of death. But hunger is not inevitable or avoidable without political and economic resolve. This is a rights and equity issue. At CIF, we want to be part of the solution, so at N4G this year, we committed 400 million by 2028 to invest in high-impact, evidence-based, cost-effective solutions. We want to break the intergenerational cycle of malnutrition and hunger with interventions like supplements for women and children to prevent malnutrition, nutritious, high-quality school meals, therapeutic foods for malnutrition treatment, and platforms of care that integrate nutrition services with partnership for governments, donors, and civil society coming together. And I just want to give you a couple of examples of the kinds of partnerships that we at CIF have been working on, because philanthropy alone doesn't get to choose where society goes. We can only work in partnership with governments and civil society around the world. We are founding donors of the UNICEF-led Child Nutrition Fund, which is a landmark coordinating mechanism. We're rallying behind governments using philanthropic matching to incentivize greater commitment from domestic resources. And we're hoping to reach 320 million women and children by 2030 across the 63 eligible countries. In 2024 alone, CNF reached almost 3 million mothers with nutritional supplements and 500,000 children with wasting treatment. It is this kind of collaboration at scale that is going to be absolutely crucial if we are to continue to make progress. The second initiative I'd like to talk about today, which is another example of innovative partnership between philanthropy and official assistance, is our partnership with the African Development Bank. We're working to unlock large-scale sustainable resources for school feeding by blending catalytic philanthropic capital with multilateral financing. It's the first-of-a-kind partnership focused on eradicating school-age hunger. And we're working with the African Development Bank to ensure the delivery of 300 million nutritious meals to children at less than 50 cents per meal through national school feeding programs by improving their quality and cost effectiveness. This work, as we've heard already from many speakers, is made very difficult by the current fiscal context. All countries are facing fiscal challenges, but none more acute than the lowest and middle-income countries that are facing a debt crisis, which we've already heard about today. We know that ODA and philanthropic capital are going to be the lifeline for many nutrition services, particularly in humanitarian and climate-related emergencies. So we're going to continue to expand our work, and we're hoping to make new commitments in the coming year to channel donor resources alongside philanthropic resources to vital nutrition and health services in crisis-hit settings. And we want to work with all governments to find more cost-effective and integrated ways of delivering these services. But foreign aid is clearly on a structural decline, so it's really essential that we support countries in financing their own development priorities. CIF wants to be a key partner to countries that are attempting to do this in very difficult circumstances, not just as a thought partner, but also helping countries overcome fiscal constraints. Our approach is not just to fund proven interventions, but it's also to help unlock fiscal headroom. Philanthropy will not replace public finance, but it can support an unlocking of public finance. We're working on reshaping the international financial system with many partners in this room, and we're also going deeper on capacity building for debt management offices and support for public financial management to improve budget execution and help the money get to those who need it. We're working with global actors on innovative mechanisms to reduce debt burdens, such as debt swaps for development, and we're looking at catalyzing larger flows of sustainable financing from governments, fiscally efficient headroom from donors through mechanisms like guarantees. Working with multilaterals and the private sector, we're also looking at improving outcome-based financing because we believe a new solidarity compact is going to be essential if we are to maintain the flows of concessional assistance. Our experience shows that government commitment and intersectoral coordination is essential. I'm always saddened at these kinds of events at the absence of ministries of finance who are essential to collaborate with sectoral ministries to enhance on-budget financing, including for nutrition. But we will continue to partner more actively with the Global Alliance in using every tool at our disposal, whether it's fiscal, financial, political, to turn capital into sustainable systems that end malnutrition for good.
أشكر لك كلمتك السيد هامبتون، وأما الآن أدعو الدكتور مراد وهبة الأمين التنفيذي للجنة الأمم المتحدة الاقتصادية والاجتماعية لغربي آسيا، فليتفضل.
Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, friends all. Allow me first to express, on behalf of ESQA, as a member of the Global Alliance, our gratitude to the State of Qatar for their hosting of this Leaders' Conference, but also allow me to express our great thanks to the co-leaders, the co-conveners of this first leaders meeting, Brazil and Spain. I remember with emotion President Lula's first declaration of Fome Zero many years ago, so thank you. I'm honored to speak before you on behalf of many countries in the Arab region on such an important topic. I'm honored, but at the same time I'm humbled by the responsibility to speak for the millions who are not in this room. The men, women, and children who, against all odds today, are fighting hunger, deprivation, and inequality. They do not need our words. They do not need our pious thoughts. They need our will to end the twin scourges of poverty and hunger. They need strong, well thought out policies. And yes, Minister, they need consistent and sufficient funding. The civil compromise is alive and well. This region, Excellencies, is a region of contrasts, as you know. Great wealth and great poverty coexist. Poverty is born of years of inherited inequality and maldistribution of resources. Sometimes hunger and poverty are the result of well-intentioned but inappropriate policy advice. And only too often, hunger is the result of conflict that in a short but brutal time erases years of growth in human development and progress. 2 out of 5 persons in the region live in countries suffering armed conflict. The changing climate threatens our social achievement, made at great cost, with drought, desertification, and reduced agricultural output. Today, 2 out of 5 persons in this region live in conflict-ridden zones. And today, the face of poverty, the face of hunger in the Arab region is the face of a young girl born in a conflict zone. The man-made famines in Sudan and in Gaza are an insult to our common humanity. These facts call for a strong reaction. And we have seen the governments of the region make impressive progress in the reduction of hunger and poverty, and solidarity in the Arab region and development cooperation from traditional donor capitals has done much to alleviate poverty and hunger. At UN ESQA, we are privileged to be working with the governments of the region, with civil society, with private enterprise, and with our sister UN agencies towards a region free from poverty in all its forms and from hunger, the scourge that threatens present and future generations. We do so by aiming to provide reliable data subtending any serious policy efforts, by supporting the governments of the region with policy advice tailor-made to their needs and with solutions appropriate to their issues. We develop national poverty frameworks, and we use modern technology, machine learning, to allow poverty-targeted social assistance programs. We're actively engaged in the Beyond GDP efforts, undertaking to assure that our measurement of poverty responds to the growing complexity of poverty and inequality and environmental degradation. As a founding member of the Global Alliance, ESQA has already supported 11 out of 22 Arab countries in joining us. We've also supported Palestine in submitting 2 proposals, one on expanding social protection and another on early childhood development. We invite you all to consider supporting these important initiatives. We hope more countries will join the alliance, and together we will finally rid the region we hold so dear of the twin scourges of poverty and hunger. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a promise I make to you, but I make it to the poor in our region. We are honored to serve. I thank you.
شكرا لكم الدكتور وهبة. ضيوفنا الأعزاء، أنوه إلى حضراتكم مرة أخرى وعلى جميع المتحدثين الالتزام بوقت التحدث المخصص، وهو 4 دقائق فقط، حيث لدينا العديد من الأصوات الأخرى التي يجب أن نستمع إليها. أما الآن فأدعو السيد إيفن ستورمون، الممثل الخاص لمبادرات الأغذية في مجموعة 20 لمملكة النرويج، فليتفضل.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished leaders and partners. Norway has been a firm supporter of the establishment of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, launched under Brazil's G20 presidency. We are proud to be a member of the Board of Champions and vice chair of the core group. Norway has contributed with $1 million to the Global Alliance support mechanism established in FAO. The Global Alliance is making strong progress. We welcome the fast-track programs that are now approved for the policy basket. We believe that national ownership and a demand-driven process for development cooperation to reach SDG 1 and 2 can be significantly strengthened by the Global Alliance. It is fundamental that the Global Alliance has a main focus on the poorest rural areas in low and lower middle-income countries, where around 3/4 of the people in extreme poverty live. We appreciated the fruitful discussion and the ODI report on the international financing landscape, which provided valuable input to the process leading up to the establishment of the Global Alliance. We need more capital to reach SDG 1 and 2. However, in the current geopolitical situation, many traditional development aid contributors are reallocating resources to national core interest in their foreign and security policy. Then, it is even more important to adjust to the international financial architecture aimed at fighting hunger and poverty. The 4th International Conference in Sevilla this year sent a clear message. The global community remains committed to financing the Sustainable Development Goals and upholding international cooperation and multilateralism despite global uncertainty. We must work through national systems and make the most of the multilateral financial institutions and their financial models with significant leverage. We must work against increased fragmentation of the delivery system, which too often results in high transaction costs for our partners. Norway would like to emphasize the following 4 key points to increase finance to achieve SDG 1 and 2. First, national ownership is central for strengthening domestic resource mobilization and reducing corruption and illegal capital flows. Improved governance, tax and fiscal policies are main responsibility for both national governments and the international community. Fair and progressive taxation and social services for all are basic pillars in efforts to reach our goals. Second, growth in climate-robust small-scale food production is the most efficient way to fight poverty and hunger. The neglect of smallholder farmers and rural population must change, as they are key for reducing poverty. The share of climate finance reaching small-scale agri-food must increase. Third, private sector investment must be incentivized through an enabling framework stimulating local food and sector value chains and markets. And fourth, we need to leverage scarce development financing more effectively. The multilateral development banks are uniquely placed to support the fight against hunger and poverty, given their ability to leverage capital markets through multiplier effects to mobilize resources for the benefit of low and middle income countries. Norway will maintain its development cooperation budget on around 1% of our gross national income. Norway supported a successful IDA replenishment and prioritizes core support to the major UN organizations and the multilateral development banks. We will work with the Global Alliance to explore the opportunities for connecting the national development programs approved in its policy basket to multilateral development finance. Thank you very much.
شكرا لكم السيد ستورمان. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة السيدة فون ميولوتو، المنسقة الوطنية لمكتب تنسيق شبكات الأمان الاجتماعي الوطنية في جمهورية نيجيريا الاتحادية، فلتتفضل.
Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished leaders, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I bring you warm greetings from the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It is an honor to share our country's experience in mobilizing fiscal and institutional capacity to fight hunger and poverty, 2 challenges that shape not only development priorities, but human dignity itself. In Nigeria, the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has placed poverty eradication and food security at the center of the renewed hope agenda. We believe that ending poverty is not achieved by spending more, but by spending better, through coordinated systems that ensure every investment delivers measurable impact for the poor and vulnerable. Through the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office, NASCO, Nigeria has built one of Africa's most robust and transparent social protection systems. At the core of this architecture is the National Social Register, a dynamic data-driven platform that now covers more than 70 million individuals and over 19 million households across Nigeria, making it one of the largest social registers in the world. The National Social Register provides the evidence base for targeting interventions, channeling resources, and ensuring that social investments truly reach those who need them most. It underpins Nigeria's cash transfers program, homegrown school feeding initiative, and agricultural livelihood support, each directly advancing the objectives of SDG 1 on ending poverty in all its forms and SDG 2 on achieving zero hunger. Beyond data, Nigeria's model is about fiscal coordination and efficiency. By harmonizing programs under one national framework, we have reduced duplications, strengthened accountability, and expanded fiscal space for growth. This means that every dollar or naira committed to fighting poverty goes further, touching more lives with less waste. We have also leveraged partnerships to strengthen financing. Through collaboration with state governments, the World Bank, UNICEF, and other development partners, Nigeria has created a platform where domestic resources and external financing converge around a shared and transparent system. This alignment ensures that all efforts, whether national or donor-funded, reinforce each other and deliver inclusive, evidence-based results. Our focus is not only to lift households out of poverty today, but to prevent them from falling back tomorrow. That is why we are integrating social protection with digital identity systems through the National Identification Number and livelihood empowerment initiatives, ensuring that safety nets evolve into pathways of productivity, resilience, and economic inclusion. Nigeria's experience shows that when governments invest in credible data, coordination, and political will, fiscal space expands not only in budget, but in possibilities. As members of this global alliance, we must continue to connect our financial strategies with evidence, our compassion with systems, and our ambition with accountability. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the fight against hunger and poverty will not be won by charity, but by structure. And Nigeria stands ready to share, to learn, and to build in building that structure for Africa and for the world. Thank you.
شكرا لكم السيدة أولوتو. والآن أرحبوا معي بالسيد رودريغو كيكو أفونسو المدير التنفيذي لمنظمة إكساو دا سيدادانيا، فليتفضل.
Dear Minister Wellington Dias, Madam Secretary Eva Granado, Mr. Secretary Renato Godinho, distinguished members of the Global Alliance, partners, and fellow civil society organizations. First, I would like to recognize President Lula for his visionary and inspiring leadership on fighting hunger and poverty, and also Minister Wellington Dias for his amazing work in Brazil, making us for the second time get out of UN's hunger map, proving that Brazilian policies work when there's a political will. It's a great honor to be here representing Ação da Cidadania, a Brazilian civil society movement founded over 30 years ago by sociologist Betinho, a man who profoundly changed the way Brazil understood hunger. He inspired a generation, and even the Brazilian government itself, to recognize that hunger is not a matter of charity, but a social and political problem born from inequality, the absence of justice, and political will.
Betinho taught us that hunger is not inevitable. It's the result of political decisions. And that's why Ação da Cidadania was created, to transform solidarity into organized action, connecting millions of citizens, communities, and organizations to fight hunger, not as an act of mercy, but as the defense of a fundamental right. His struggle directly influenced the creation of transformative public policies such as Fome Zero, the National Council for Food and Security, and Brazilian programs that became global reference for fighting hunger and poverty with dignity. None of this would be possible without the strength and the persistence of Brazilian civil society. Social movements, community networks, and NGOs that demanded from the state the recognition of food as a constitutional right. It was civil society that designed participatory councils, monitored results, and held governments accountable, proving that democracy and food security must advance together. Throughout our history, Ação da Cidadania has also provided food to more than 50 million Brazilians, making Ação da Cidadania the leading food security organization in Brazil today. These are not just numbers. They represent lives, communities, and the power of citizens to act when governments fall short. And what is true in Brazil is also true for the world. Without an active, organized civil society, the fight against hunger and poverty will always remain incomplete. Governments can design programs. The private sector can invest. But it's citizens who give legitimacy, oversight, and continuity to these efforts. That's why the Global Alliance is so important, because it recognizes that evidence and participations must go hand in hand. Solid data without public engagement is sterile. Activism without evidence is fragile. Only when we bring together can we achieve lasting impact. And that, in that spirit, that I would like to share a new initiative that we are launching today under the knowledge pillar of this alliance. Our alliance is built on a shared conviction. Without solid evidence and an active civil society, the fight against hunger and poverty will remain trapped in rhetoric and limited impact. On behalf of Ação da Cidadania, together with Instituto Fome Zero and Instituto Comida da Manhã, members of the Civil Society Board of Champions seats, it is an honor to take the opportunity to announce a joint initiative under the knowledge pillar of the Global Alliance. The Global Assessment of Anti-Hunger Initiatives from 2009 to 2024, a collaborative research effort designed to strengthen evidence-based action against hunger and poverty. Over the past decades, the world has created dozens of initiatives to eradicate hunger. Yet many have operated in a fragmented way. With dispersed resources and disconnected metrics, today we have the responsibility to turn those lessons into coordinated action. That is why these three organizations are jointly leading the Global Assessment of Anti-Hunger Initiatives, a study that will, for the first time, compile comparable data on governance, financing, and results. Our goal is clear: to generate knowledge that informs policy decisions and unlocks international financing flows, especially toward family farming, short supply chains, and integrated policies that connect school feeding, nutrition, and climate adaptation. This is a direct contribution from civil society to support the success of the Global Alliance by ensuring that lessons from the past guide smarter, more coordinated action in the future. We want to ensure that every dollar invested produces sustainable results, grounded in transparency, accountability, and scientific evidence. Because hunger is not merely a humanitarian emergency, it's a failure of global coordination. And coordination is like a bridge. It's not enough to build strong bridges between governments, US agencies, and civil society if no one dares to cross them. We must ensure that ideas, data, and resources truly flow across these bridges, transforming dialogue into cooperation and cooperation change. Today, November 3rd, Mr. Wellington, is a particularly meaningful day for us. It marks the 19th birthday of Betinho, the founder of Ação da Cidadania, a man who believed that fighting hunger was not about feeding bodies, but about restoring dignity. How symbolic it is that we gather here today, continuing his legacy on a global stage, building the bridges he dreamed of between solidarity and action. And only through evidence-based policies, predictable finance, and genuine cooperation among governments, agencies, and science, and civil society can we build a future where eating with dignity is no longer a privilege, but once again, a right. Thank you very much.
شكرا لكم السيد أفونسو. أدعو الآن السيدة يولاند رايت نائب رئيس الشراكات في منظمة Give Directly فلتتفضل لإلقاء كلمتها.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, it's an honor to be here, hosted by Qatar, Brazil, and Spain, in this alliance committed to ending the scourge of hunger and extreme poverty. Shrinking aid budgets, rising debt, conflict, and climate shocks are tightening fiscal space at the moment we need it most. At Give Directly, we exist to change that dynamic. Our mission is to accelerate the end of extreme poverty by delivering cash directly into the hands or phones of those who need it most, the majority of whom are women. We've transferred nearly $1 billion already to 1.8 million people across 15 countries, predominantly in Africa, using digital tools and AI to be efficient, transparent, and scalable. Our flagship approach is large, unconditional cash transfers. Robust, independent evidence has proved that transfers of around $500 per adult deliver rapid and lasting progress toward ending poverty and hunger. They enable households to rapidly increase food security, build assets, expand employment, and stimulate local economies, up to 2.5 times the amount of cash initially delivered. And they are a dignified way to support entrepreneurs, farmers, youth to create their own resilient futures, and a complement to national social protection systems. In Rwanda, through the graduation strategy of the government and with support from the Qatar Fund for Development, we've delivered $1,100 per household to more than 200,000 families living in extreme poverty. In program areas, food insecurity dropped by 65%, livestock ownership doubled, savings tripled, and over 96% of children were attending school. Inspired by these sorts of tangible impacts, we've also facilitated the Canva Foundation to commit $100 million to Give Directly to scale up our delivery in Malawi. This complements Malawi's national cash transfer program and explores how upfront, speedy investments can reduce the long-term pressure on national systems. We're also funding the largest randomized control trial of these lump sums and are testing scalable digital plus elements such as AI-powered coaching. Give Directly commits, as part of this global alliance, to 1, expanding digital delivery. While global mobile phone penetration is expanding, the poor are often left behind. To date, we've provided over 650,000 mobile phones, mainly to women, and worked with telcos to expand coverage, paving the way for financial inclusion and secure, direct cash delivery. 2, data and AI innovation. We are leveraging AI and machine learning using satellite images and mobile phone metadata to identify and reach the poorest families faster and more accurately, strengthening national targeting systems. We're also piloting AI to provide plus elements, including agriculture and health advice. We're also committed to evidence and learning, building shared research to demonstrate the fiscal and economic case for large lump sums to drive SDG 1 and 2. Finally, I'd like to encourage everyone here to think about large cash transfers as an investment. They achieve a wide range of benefits I've already mentioned, and this year we found they also reduced infant mortality by 48% in the villages that receive cash. They're not charity, they're an investment in human capital and potential. And crucially, they're actually something that we could afford to do in the next 10 years, costing less a fraction of the 160 billion return on billionaires' assets annually. Ending extreme poverty is fiscally feasible within our lifetimes. Give Directly stands ready as part of this wider alliance to turn this model into a shared roadmap for ending extreme poverty and hunger, one that's digitally and AI-enabled, evidence-led, and crucially builds on the ingenuity and dignity of people living in extreme poverty themselves. Thank you.
شكرا لكم السيدة رايت. أدعو الآن إلى المنصة السيدة دانا بوزدوتشا رئيس الشراكة والدعوة والمشاركة الخارجية في منظمة الرؤية العالمية الدولية، فلتتفضل.
Excellencies, distinguished leaders, colleagues and partners, it's an honor to join you at this first leaders meeting of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. And I want to start with a heartfelt appreciation for our co-chairs, Brazil and Spain, for their amazing leadership of the Global Alliance, and to Qatar for the very elegant hosting of this meeting. I speak on behalf of World Vision International, a Christian relief, development, and advocacy organization who is working with the children, families, and communities to overcome poverty and injustice. For 75 years already, World Vision has co-created practical, evidence-based solutions with communities serving all people regardless of religion or background, and bringing this learning into global spaces to drive systemic change. This meeting is such a source of hope for many of us here, but more importantly, for the families and the children who need solutions to cope with hunger and poverty as we speak today. We gathered not only to reflect, but to act, to turn declarations into delivery and promises into progress for the world's most vulnerable children who are living under the spectrum of hunger and poverty today. After years of progress, we are now seeing worrying signs of decline. 333 million children still live in extreme poverty, and 1 in 6 grows up amid conflict. The climate crisis strengthens their right to safety, to food, to learning, increasing the risk of hunger, displacement, and overall lost human capital. We live in a world that produces enough food for everyone, so hunger is therefore not inevitable. It reflects the political will to act. So opening fiscal space and mobilizing financing for the fight against hunger and poverty are not only technical efforts, they are collective decisions that we can make together about our priorities and the kind of future that we choose to build. We are behind our global commitments. We have no more time to lose. We must come together so that each organization here contributes what it does best, optimizing available resources, investing in what we know it works. And we must use evidence rigorously, as Kiko was saying earlier, to avoid repeating the failures of recent years. In a context of fiscal constraints, rising humanitarian needs, and growing scrutiny over the multilateral effectiveness, there is an urgent need to strengthen coordination and knowledge sharing among the global actors. This is why we joined the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, to deepen cooperation, to share evidence from our own work with communities, and to help translate knowledge into action. And within the alliance, the fast-track countries really hold the key, a key to accelerate progress towards ending poverty and hunger. And their success really depends on the genuine partnerships, shared accountability, and participation of government, civil society, and communities alike. And World Vision is committed to working alongside governments in the fast-track countries to advance the shared agenda into real and measurable results for the children and their families. Our Enough global campaign on child hunger and malnutrition supports policies and actions to eliminate hunger and poverty for children around 85 countries. And we committed to invest $3.4 billion between 2023 and 2026 to find hunger and poverty. This is our reaffirmation of our global commitment to accelerate progress for children. So together we must invest wisely. We must scale what works and turn commitments into real change for the children and families. Let this meeting be remembered as the moment when we chose delivery over delay, when we strengthened the alliance built on trust, when we share purposes and the conviction that ending hunger is possible, when each of us, the organizations who are contributing, does what we know best for a common goal. When we finance hope, we finance change, and together this alliance can make that hope very real, ensuring that every child has enough nutritious food, enough opportunities, and enough hope. Thank you so much.
شكرا لكم السيدة بوزدوتشا. والآن رحبوا معي بالسيد جابرييل فيريرو المستشار الاستراتيجي الأول في برنامج الأمن الغذائي والزراعي العالمي، فليتفضل.
Querido Ministro, querida Secretaria de Estado, Excellencies, distinguished fellow delegates, I'm honored to join this first leaders meeting representing the Global Agricultural and Food Security Program, the GAAHP family. Allow me first to thank the government of Qatar for hosting this meeting and commend the governments of Brazil and Spain, and very especially Minister Wellington Diaz and Secretary of State Eva Granados for your leadership and for your outstanding steer of the alliance. Excellencies, you may know the Global Agricultural and Food Security Program is a multilateral partnership and financing platform dedicated to improving food security and nutrition in the world's poorest countries. Launched by the G20 in 2010 after the global food crisis, GAAHP provides coordinated support to country and stakeholder-led long-term investments in inclusive agri-food systems that address the root causes of food insecurity. It brings together contributing partners and countries, the UN Rome-based agencies, FAO, IFAD, WFP, multilateral development banks, including the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank, as well as producer and civil society organizations. And since 2010, GAAHP has deployed more than $2.4 billion in grants and concessional financing to countries, producer organizations, agribusiness, and financial intermediaries, reaching nearly 32 million people. Distinguished delegates, commitments need to be coupled with accountability for results. Let me now share the progress on our commitments with the Alliance. Since the Alliance was established, GAAHP has delivered on its commitment to organize anew the 8th 38 million call for producer organization-led proposals supporting smallholder farmers in low-income countries, while funding allocations are expected by the Steering Committee in February 2026. GAAHP has also launched its new second-generation blended finance window, the Business Investment Financing Track, with a 75 million grant envelope to improve access to credit and financial services for smallholder farmers, producer organizations, micro and SMEs, and startups through blended finance. The African Development Bank has been the first MDB partner to receive a 14 million allocation in the Risking Capital and Technical Assistance grant from GAAHP, expecting to unlock up to 200 million in private sector lending across Ethiopia, Uganda, Tanzania, Malawi, and Zambia. And meanwhile, IFAD and the Asian Development Bank are currently developing additional blended finance innovations under the Business Investment Financing track this year. Under its forthcoming Vision 2030 Strategic Plan 2026-2030, expected to be adopted before the end of this year, GAAHP will first scale up its efforts in support of the Alliance financing pillar by deploying an additional $204.7 million by 2028 in innovative, integrated programs for agri-food systems transformation, particularly in support of the African Union's Comprehensive Agriculture African Development Programme, the GAAHP 2026-2035. Second, it will strengthen its collaboration with the Global Alliance Knowledge Pillar, starting the GAAHP Knowledge Forum, expected to take place at FAO headquarters in May 2026. And finally, through its new Vision 2030 strategic program, GAAHP will contribute to implementing the Civil Platform for Action commitments that aim at enhancing the integration and coordination of development and climate finance sources, at supporting least developed countries in implementing integrated programs, and at mobilizing $500 million investment. To that end, GAAHP is already deploying partnerships with the Global Climate Funds. Co-chairs and fellow members, you can count on GAAHP as a financing platform ready to help translate the bold vision of the Alliance into concrete action. Thank you.
شكرا لكم السيد فيريرو. فليتفضل الآن سعادة السيد ناوتو هيساتشيما سفير اليابان لدى دولة قطر ليلقي كلمته.
Thank you, Chairs, Excellencies, distinguished representatives. In 2024, it is estimated that approximately 830 million people worldwide have faced extreme poverty, and 720 million worldwide faced hunger. The situation is particularly severe in Africa, where 1 out of 5 Africans, over 300 million, face hunger. Japan has been vigorously working to eradicate hunger and poverty under the concept of human security to ensure no one is left behind. Over the past 5 years, Japan has contributed approximately $16.7 million in measures to combat hunger and poverty, and in addition to bilateral support through Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, Japan has collaborated with international organizations such as FAO and WFP to provide both short-term emergency food assistance and mid to and long-term self-reliance support globally, including in Africa. We are also focusing on nutrition improvement to achieve universal health coverage. Since 1993, Japan has hosted the TICAD, Tokyo International Conference on African Development. This August, we convened the 9th TICAD under the theme of co-creating innovative solutions with Africa. On this occasion, we shared progress of the African Food Security Initiative, first announced during TICAD 8. Through this initiative, Japan aims to help build resilient food systems by 2030. Key targets include producing food for an additional 250 million people, improving nutrition for 270,000 individuals, providing annual training to 50,000 rice producers, and increasing the income of 1 million small-scale farmers. In this respect, I'd like to introduce two specific measures under this initiative. The first is the establishment of Coalition for African Rice Development, called CARD. Japan has supported the formulation of rice development strategies in sub-Saharan African countries and assisted in increasing rice production in line with each country's strategy. As a result, rice production doubled in 10 years until 2018, and now it aims to further double the production by 2030. The second initiative is a capacity building support for smallholder farmers under SHEP approach, which stands for Smallholder Horticulture Empowerment and Promotion. It aims not only to increase crop productivity, but to enhance cultivation management and marketing capabilities. With a focus on marketability, since its launch in Kenya in 2006, related training has been conducted in 71 countries worldwide, including Africa, Latin America, Asia, and the Middle East. In conclusion, to eradicate hunger and poverty, a wide range of actors must work in close collaboration and cooperation. In this regard, after its establishment 1 year ago, the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty has become a key comprehensive forum as it involves a number of countries, international organizations, and numerous private sector entities. Japan is committed to actively work together with stakeholders participating in this alliance in our shared pursuit of eradicating hunger and poverty. I thank you.
شكرا لكم سعادة السفير. وأدعو إلى المنصة الآن سعادة السيدة فلورنس تينغلي ماتليف سفيرة الاتحاد السويسري لدى دولة قطر، فلتتفضل.
Distinguished co-chairs, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Switzerland commends Brazil, the transition support team and partners for the important work undertaken in the past year, and the state of Qatar for hosting the first leaders' meetings of Alliance. As we are sliding back on achieving SDG 1 globally and SDG 2 in particular in sub-Saharan Africa, Switzerland would like to thank Brazil for refocusing our global attention towards eradicating extreme poverty and hunger as a condition for achieving the wider SDG ambition. It is an important reminder of our collective responsibility to support coherent national and international public policies that champion sustainable, inclusive, and just transition pathways. SDG 1 and 2 include clear targets, such as expanding social protection coverage, ensuring access to basic services, and building resilient agricultural practices. However, even if social protection programs have a demonstrated capacity to deliver results, they are significantly underfunded. As President Lula underlined during the opening of the Alliance support mechanism in Rome 2 weeks ago, without financial resources, there will be no transformation. Indeed, needs are immense and public financial resources are under pressure. Transforming food systems required integrated, effective, tailored, and cross-sectoral financing aligned with the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, and human rights obligations. Debt sustainability and domestic resource mobilization remain essential to national level solutions. And bridging the financial gap requires stronger coordination and collaboration between development, climate, and humanitarian finance. The fight against hunger and malnutrition is one of the main objectives of the international cooperation strategy of Switzerland. We address both short-term and long-term needs. We provide emergency food aid and support food systems by transformation, by enhancing the capacity of local food value chain and regional market to absorb shocks from economic crisis and climate change. We support an equitable and participatory governance of this transformation, with civil society included in the decision-making processes affecting them, in particular, the most vulnerable and marginalized people. We collaborate with Swiss academic institutions and a rich ecosystem of private sector stakeholders, impact investors, and philanthropists to mobilize financing for the fight against hunger and poverty. Donors and finance institutions must collaborate to attract private investors and scale impact investment. We urge multilateral development banks and development finance institutions to use their balance sheet to lend at a larger scale, requiring a rethink of current models. At the same time, donors should shift from traditional grants towards an investment enabling role, especially in times of limited budget. This can be done through various ways, either in terms of risk transfer mechanism, like guarantees and fire loss investment, or through risk mitigation instrument, such as technical assistance or capacity building. In this regard, we would like to highlight the potential impact-linked financing schemes which financial rewards or terms are directly tied to the achievement of measurable social or environmental outcomes, an area in which Switzerland has built considerable experience over the last decade. A key opportunity in development finance is to de-risk investment in transformative food system through blended finance, channeling more capital into this priority area. Improving food, health, and social systems requires courage and patience, cooperation, and dialogue with many different partners. Switzerland is committed to contribute further to this effort. Thank you.
شكرا لكم سعادتكم. أما الآن فأدعو سعادة السيدة وفاء بني مصطفى وزير التنمية الاجتماعية في المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية فلتتفضل لتلقي كلمتها.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الحضور الكريم، أتقدم باسم المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية بخالص التقدير لدولة قطر الشقيقة على استضافتها لهذا الحدث البارز، وكذلك لمنظمة الأمم المتحدة على جهودها، ولجمهورية البرازيل على قيادتها هذه المبادرة ضمن مجموعة ال20 لتجسد روح التضامن العالمي والسعي نحو تنمية أكثر عدلاً وإنصافاً. ويشرفني أن أكون معكم اليوم في الاجتماع الأول لقادة التحالف العالمي ضد الجوع والفقر، وفي لحظة حاسمة تتطلب تكاثف الجهود وتعزيز الإرادة السياسية لمواجهة أحد أبرز التحديات الإنسانية في عصرنا. السيدات والسادة، لقد جعل الأردن من مكافحة الفقر وتعزيز العدالة الاجتماعية أولوية وطنية، وجعلها محوراً رئيسياً في مسارات تحديثه الاقتصادي والإداري والسياسي. ومن هذا الالتزام أطلقت الحكومة الأردنية منظومة حماية اجتماعية متكاملة تشمل الدعم النقدي والتحويلات الاجتماعية إلى جانب برامج التمكين الاقتصادي للأسر بهدف تحويل الأفراد من الاعتماد إلى الإنتاج والعيش الكريم. كما عملنا على تعزيز التحول الرقمي في إدارة الدعم الاجتماعي من خلال السجل الوطني الموحد وتطوير نظام الإنذار الاجتماعي المبكر لرصد الفئات الأكثر حاجة قبل وصولها إلى مرحلة الأزمة، بما يعكس رؤية التحالف القائمة على الوقاية قبل الاستجابة ولضمان وصول الخدمات إلى مستحقيها بعدالة وكفاءة. وفي مجال الأمن الغذائي بنى الأردن منظومة متكاملة جعلته يتقدم في المؤشرات العالمية الخاصة بالأمن الغذائي على مستوى المنطقة والعالم. كما أطلق الاستراتيجية الوطنية للأمن الغذائي 2021-2030 لتكون إطاراً وطنياً مستداماً يضمن الحفاظ على هذه المؤشرات واستدامتها. وفي مجال تعزيز البحث والابتكار في مجالات مكافحة الفقر، تستضيف الأردن المركز العربي لدراسات السياسات الاجتماعية والقضاء على الفقر متعدد الأبعاد، الذي يمثل منصة إقليمية رائدة للبحث والتحليل المتعمق بقضايا الفقر بمختلف أبعاده، ويجمع بين الخبرات الوطنية والإقليمية والدولية لتقديم سياسات اجتماعية مبتكرة ومستندة إلى الأدلة. ويهدف المركز إلى تعزيز فهم أبعاد الفقر المختلفة بما يدعم جهود التحالف العالمي ضد الجوع والفقر. السيدات والسادة، إن المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية تؤمن بأن آثار تغير المناخ ليست متساوية، فهي تؤثر بشكل أكبر على الفئات الأكثر ضعفاً، ولا يمكن تحقيق التنمية المستدامة دون استجابات مناخية عادلة وشاملة. ومن هذا المنطلق فإننا نؤيد المبادئ الأساسية لإعلان بليم التي تركز على الحماية الاجتماعية ودعم صغار منتجي الغذاء وتمكين التحول العادل في المناطق الخاصة بالغابات والمجتمعات المحلية والضعيفة. تلتزم المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية بالمساهمة في تحقيق هذه الأهداف من خلال برامج الحماية الاجتماعية ودعم الأسر المنتجة وتعزيز الاستجابة للأزمات المناخية، بما يعزز مرونة المجتمع ويضمن أن لا يترك أحد خلف الركب. السيدات والسادة، لقد وضعنا كدول مكافحة الجوع هدفاً رئيسياً لنا، لكننا اليوم أمام واقع مرير تجاوز مسألة الجوع إلى المجاعة. في غزة المنكوبة أطفال ونساء وأبرياء يذهبون ضحايا لنقص الماء والغذاء والدواء. هذا يجعلنا أمام مسؤولية مشتركة للتأكيد على حقهم في الحياة والعيش بكرامة. والأردن من هذا المنطلق وبتوجيهات من جلالة الملك عبد الله الثاني حفظه الله يواصل دوره في تقديم المساعدات الإنسانية والإغاثية، بينما تواصل مستشفياتنا الميدانية هناك إنقاذ الأرواح وتضميد الجراح. في الختام أؤكد التزام الأردن بقيادة جلالة الملك عبد الله الثاني بن الحسين المعظم بالاستمرار في دعم ومساندة كل الجهود الدولية لمكافحة الفقر والجوع وتعزيز كرامة الإنسان وحقه في حياة كريمة. ونتطلع لأن يشكل هذا التحالف منصة فاعلة لتوحيد الجهود وتسريع التقدم نحو تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكراً لسعادة الوزيرة. نصل الآن وإياكم إلى مداخلتنا الأخيرة، لذا فاسمحوا لي أن أدعو إلى المنصة سعادة السيد طارق النابلسي الوزير المفوض لجامعة الدول العربية، فليتفضل.
معالي الرئيس، السيدات والسادة، سوف أختصر كلمتي وأسلمها كاملة أخذا في الاعتبار ضيق الوقت. Excellency, أود بداية باسم جامعة الدول العربية أن أتقدم لكم بالشكر على الدعوة الكريمة للمشاركة في هذا الحدث الدولي الهام، والذي حرصنا على المشاركة فيه تأكيدا على التعاون الوثيق مع التحالف لمواجهة الجوع والفقر اللذان يمثلا القضية الرئيسية التي تمس حياة الإنسان اليومية بشكل مباشر وانطلاقا من حقه الأصيل في الحياة الكريمة. سيد الرئيس، تعرب جامعة الدول العربية عن استعدادها الكامل للانضمام إلى تحالفكم الموقر بما يسهم في تحقيق أهدافه السامية المرجوة، ويأتي هذا التوجه مواصلة لجهود جامعة الدول العربية في هذين المجالين الهامين اللذان يشكلا مقدمة أهداف خطة التنمية المستدامة 2030. وكما تعلمون فإن لدى المنطقة العربية قواسم كثيرة مشتركة مع أقاليم العالم، ولديه أيضا إمكانيات طبيعية وبشرية هائلة إذا ما تم استثمارها بالشكل السليم سوف تسهم بشكل فاعل في تعزيز المسيرة الدولية للقضاء على الفقر والجوع. إلا أن ما شاهدته المنطقة العربية ولا زالت من بعض الممارسات للقوى القائمة بالاحتلال، وأيضا بعض الصراعات الداخلية قد شكلت بعض العقبات في تحسين تلك الأوضاع الإنسانية، ونأمل أن تتحسن قريبا. أخذا في الاعتبار ما تقدم وتأكيدا على العزم العربي لمواصلة مسيرة التنمية الاجتماعية بكافة أبعادها، أقر القادة العرب العديد من المبادرات وفي مقدمتها الإطار الاستراتيجي العربي للقضاء على الفقر متعدد الأبعاد 2030، وذلك في القمة العربية التنموية، ويهدف إلى خفض نسب الفقر بمختلف أبعاده إلى نصف بحلول عام 2030 في المنطقة العربية، ويتضمن العديد من التدابير والإجراءات الهامة التي تسهم في القضاء على الجوع أيضا. ويشكل هذا الإطار خطة عمل متكاملة الأركان محددة الأطوار بين كافة المتدخلين. كما أقرت القمة العربية أيضا إنشاء المركز العربي لدراسات السياسات الاجتماعية والقضاء على الفقر متعدد الأبعاد وبمقره بالمملكة الأردنية الهاشمية، وأعتقد أنه سيمثل أيضا أحد الأمور الهامة التي يمكن أن نتعاون من خلالها. في ذات السياق أشير إلى اعتماد القمة العربية التنموية الخامسة الرؤية العربية 2045، والتي تعبر عن الأمل في مستقبل مشرق تتحقق فيه آمال شعوب المنطقة العربية أفرادا ومجموعات، وهي رؤية تسعى إلى النهوض بالهمم وتحفز على العمل المشترك والتعاون الإقليمي والدولي. ويتكامل مع هذه الرؤية منظور ملكية الشباب للمستقبل من خلال طرح مبادرات متعددة المشاريع. معالي الرئيس، السيدات والسادة، لدى جامعة الدول العربية العديد من المبادرات لا يسع المجال لذكرها كلها، إلا أنها تدعم أهداف وتوجهات تحالفكم الموقر، ونؤكد مجددا على استعداد الجامعة من خلال أجهزتها ومنظماتها المتخصصة ومجلس وزراء الشؤون الاجتماعية العرب على التعاون بمحقق الأهداف السامية للتحالف. وشكرا.
شكرا لكم سعادة الوزير المفوض. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الوفود المشاركة، لقد اختتمنا وإياكم جلسة هذا اليوم من اجتماع القادة. أشكر جميع المتحدثين على مساهماتهم الملهمة والموضوعية. وسننتقل الآن إلى استراحة الغداء، وسيستأنف الاجتماع في تمام الساعة 51 مساء أي بعد الظهر، لذا أطلب من جميع المندوبين التفضل بالعودة إلى القاعة في تمام الساعة 51 حتى نتمكن من استئناف أعمالنا في الوقت المحدد. وأود أن أنوه أن هناك يتوفر مرفق للتموين للوفود، بالإضافة إلى أن إذا كنتم بحاجة إلى إرشادات فيرجى استشارة موظفي الدعم لدينا. نراكم إذن بعد الظهر لإكمال مهامنا، وغداء هنيئا.